Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're listening to this to fall asleep, get cozy and relax. Today, I'll be sharing with you some real-life crime cases from around the world. But before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Alright, let's dive in. Heather Maples, a vibrant 22-year-old, had just begun her college journey in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, filled with promise and ambition. Settling into her new job at a real estate agency, she radiated an infectious energy that uplifted everyone around her. Her smile was contagious, her laughter filled the air, and her constant chatter brought warmth to any room. Life seemed to be unfolding beautifully for Heather, a young woman whose courage and zest for life were envied by many. But everything changed on August 7, 2015, when Heather failed to show up for work. Her lifeless body was discovered in her apartment, partially unclothed, marking the beginning of a harrowing investigation into a crime that seemed to defy reason. On that fateful morning, Kelsey Price, Heather's friend and colleague, arrived at the real estate agency in Murfreesboro as usual. Heather was running late, which wasn't entirely surprising. Kelsey knew her friend wasn't the most punctual person. Smiling to herself, Kelsey began her tasks, expecting Heather to stroll in with her characteristic charm. When Heather didn't appear, Kelsey tried calling her to nudge her awake, but the calls went unanswered. The previous night, Heather had planned to go out to a local bar with friends and had jokingly asked Kelsey to come get her if she overslept or didn't pick up. Unfazed, Kelsey decided to head to Heather's apartment, as the two lived in the same residential complex where they worked. Arriving at Heather's apartment, Kelsey noticed the front door was unlocked, which struck her as odd but not alarming. She stepped inside, calling out to her friend, expecting to find Heather sprawled across her bed, recovering from a late night. Instead, she saw Heather lying on her stomach, dressed only in a crop top, her lower body bare. Assuming Heather had had a wild night, Kelsey approached with a playful grin, ready to tease her friend awake. She tapped Heather's foot, but there was no response. A second, firmer tap yielded the same result. A chill ran down Kelsey's spine as she touched Heather's foot again. It was icy cold. Horror washed over her as the realization hit. Heather wasn't sleeping. Reeling in shock, Kelsey stumbled out of the apartment and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported the unthinkable. Emergency services arrived swiftly, followed by Detective Tommy Massey, one of the first officers on the scene. The forensic team began meticulously combing through the apartment, uncovering a scene of unimaginable brutality. Heather was partially undressed, her face bearing signs of violent blows. Her hair was soaked in blood, and crimson splatters stained the walls, painting a grim picture of the assault she had endured. It was clear she had been beaten, tortured, and sexually assaulted before her death. Detective Massey, alongside his colleague Detective Maples, coincidentally sharing Heather's surname, later described the crime as a horrifying nightmare. The sheer violence of the scene was difficult to process, even for seasoned investigators. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida. Her mother, Jennifer Hunter, affectionately called her a hurricane baby, a nickname that perfectly captured Heather's boundless energy and fearless spirit. In 2004, Jennifer gave birth to her second child, Ryan, whom Heather welcomed with open arms. When Ryan was diagnosed with significant developmental delays, Heather, then in 7th grade, took it upon herself to care for him. She spent countless hours helping him learn to speak, walk, and eat independently, showering him with love and patience. Her dedication to her brother continued through her high school years, a testament to her selflessness and compassion. At 22, Heather made the bold decision to leave her home in Texas and start anew in Tennessee, chasing her dream of becoming a psychologist. The opportunity came through a call from her former classmate Chaz, who invited her to join him in Murfreesboro, a small college town he described as the perfect place for her ambitions. Heather accepted, and in January 2015, she moved to Murfreesboro, where her friendship with Chaz soon blossomed into romance. With the support of her best friend, Kelsey, Heather secured a job at the office of their residential complex, balancing work with her college preparations. Friends and family rallied behind her, and everything seemed to be falling into place. However, her relationship with Chaz began to falter, marked by tension and his struggles with anger management. The couple broke up, and Chaz moved away, leaving Heather to focus on her future. Just a week before her death, Heather called her mother with exhilarating news. She had been accepted into college. Jennifer, bursting with pride, celebrated her daughter's achievement, unaware that tragedy was looming. When Heather didn't show up for work on August 7th, concern rippled through her circle, setting the stage for the grim discovery that would shatter their world. Detectives quickly recognized that the nature of the crime suggested a personal connection. The absence of forced entry in Heather's apartment indicated she likely knew her attacker and may have let them in willingly. Early in the investigation, most of Heather's friends were considered suspects, as the motive remained elusive. Heather had no known enemies, making the brutality of her death all the more perplexing. The forensic team uncovered critical evidence, unknown DNA, a hair that didn't belong to Heather, and most significantly, a clear bloody fingerprint on the right side of her bed. Detective Massey noted that the fingerprint was so precise it could have been deliberately left, as if someone had dipped their finger in ink. All evidence was sent for analysis, and Heather's mobile phone, found in the apartment, became a focal point. However, without the password, accessing its contents was impossible. Kelsey proved invaluable, not only helping unlock Heather's phone, but also taking on the heartbreaking task of informing Jennifer of her daughter's death. She believed the news would be better coming from someone who loved Heather deeply. Detective Massey relied on Kelsey to shed light on Heather's personal life, particularly her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey revealed that Chaz had anger issues and could be aggressive and cruel, prompting Heather to end the relationship. This made Chaz an immediate suspect, and the police began investigating him. An unexpected development shifted their focus. A young man named Michael attempted to access Heather's apartment despite the police tape, claiming he had keys to the unit. Michael explained that on the evening of August 6th, Heather had invited him for dinner, which he accepted. After dinner, he went home, while Heather headed to a local bar with friends. Later that night, she called him for help, saying a man named Otavio was bothering her aggressively at the bar. Michael drove to the bar, picked Heather up, and dropped her off at her apartment around 2:30 a.m. on August 7th, the last time he saw her alive. He mentioned that Heather's front door was likely unlocked because he had her keys, as she was wearing a dress without pockets, and he forgot to return them. Michael seemed genuinely upset and cooperative, but the police took his fingerprints and DNA for comparison. Surveillance footage from the bar corroborated his story, and the forensic analysis confirmed that his DNA and fingerprints didn't match those found at the crime scene, clearing him as a suspect. The investigation turned to Otavio, the man who had harassed Heather at the bar. With Kelsey's help, detectives unlocked Heather's phone and discovered she had texted Otavio, inviting him to her apartment just hours before her death. This puzzled the investigators. Why would Heather invite Otavio over after he had upset her? Kelsey explained that the two were friends, and Otavio's behavior at the bar had been unusually persistent, catching Heather off guard. Detectives brought Otavio in for questioning, noting that he seemed unaware of Heather's death. During a tough interrogation, Otavio was shocked by the news and denied any involvement. He willingly provided a DNA sample, confident it would clear him. The results confirmed his innocence, as his DNA didn't match the evidence, ruling him out as a suspect. With no clear leads, the detectives worked tirelessly, reviewing surveillance footage and witness statements. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Detective Massey prepared to leave the office late at night, he received a pivotal call from the forensic laboratory. The bloody fingerprint on Heather's bed belonged to Brandon Bowling, a young man whose prints were on file from a previous job. This breakthrough reinvigorated the investigation. Massey approached Bowling's interrogation carefully, giving him a chance to explain his presence at the crime scene. Bowling claimed he hadn't seen Heather recently, but the fresh fingerprint suggested otherwise. As the questioning intensified, Bowling seemed to realize he was cornered but continued to deny involvement. The detectives requested a DNA sample, framing it as a way to prove his innocence. Bowling complied, perhaps hoping to be released, but the police had other plans. Without waiting for the DNA results, the investigators sought a court order to access Bowling's phone, hoping to track his movements, calls, and texts from the night of the crime. What they found was beyond comprehension. A video on Bowling's phone, uncovered after court approval, revealed a chilling record of the crime. The footage captured Heather's room, showing intimate acts followed by brutal beatings. Heather was still alive during the recording, her suffering preserved in horrifying detail. Even the most experienced detectives were shaken by the evidence. In February 2018, Brandon Richmond Bowling pleaded guilty to the attack on Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Jennifer, Heather's mother, delivered a surprising speech. In the courthouse corridor, she approached Bowling's mother and embraced her, saying they had both lost their children that day, a poignant acknowledgement of their shared grief. Despite the conviction, Bowling never explained his motives, leaving a haunting question mark over the tragedy. Heather Maples' life, filled with promise and love, was cut short by an act of senseless violence. Her story is a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring pain of those left behind, forever seeking answers that may never come. In the early hours of May 25, 1996, Kristen Smart, a 19-year-old freshman at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, vanished without a trace. Last seen at 2 a.m., allegedly intoxicated and passed out on a neighbor's lawn after an off-campus party, she was accompanied by two fellow students who offered to help her back to her dorm. The third student, Paul Flores, stepped in to assist, claiming he lived closest to her Muir Hall residence. Kristen was never seen again, her trail going cold for over 2 decades. Despite persistent suspicion surrounding Flores, the lack of solid leads left her case unsolved, until a determined podcaster and a grieving family reignited the search for justice. Kristen's disappearance not only shattered her loved ones, but also sparked legislative changes to ensure student safety, forever altering the landscape of her university and beyond. Kristen Denise Smart was born on February 20, 1977, in Augsburg, Bavaria, West Germany, to Stan and Denise Smart, both teachers for children of American military personnel. The eldest of 3 siblings, Kristen grew up in a close-knit family that eventually settled in Stockton, California. Her mother described her as a dreamer, with an adventurous spirit and a deep love for the ocean. Kristen's zest for life was infectious. She was always eager to explore, create, and connect. After graduating from Lincoln High School in 1995, she worked as a lifeguard and camp counselor at Camp Mokulea in Hawaii, experiences that fueled her passion for new horizons. In 1996, she enrolled at Cal Poly to study architecture, drawn to her love of drawing, though she later switched her major to communication studies, inspired by dreams of becoming a globe-trotting reporter like Joan London. Memorial Day weekend of 1996 was supposed to be like any other for Kristen. She called home, leaving a cheerful voicemail. Good news, good news. I'll call home Sunday. Her family, accustomed to her weekly Sunday check-ins, looked forward to hearing from her. But the call never came, and for the Smarts, all communication with her daughter ceased that fateful weekend. On Friday night, Kristen attended an off-campus birthday party, dropped off by her friend Margarita Campos. Margarita recalled Kristen being slightly upset that she couldn't join her for the evening, but her parting words were a reminder to be careful. The warm California night saw Kristen dressed casually in a cropped gray t-shirt, black surf shorts, and red Puma sneakers. Witnesses at the party gave conflicting accounts. Some claimed she was heavily intoxicated, others insisted she hadn't been drinking at all, and a few speculated she might have been slipped a date rape drug. At 2 a.m. on May 25th, fellow student Tim Davis spotted Kristen passed out on a neighbor's lawn near the party. Concerned for her safety, he and Cheryl Anderson, an acquaintance of Kristen's, helped her to her feet and began walking her back to her campus dorm, Muir Hall. Along the way, Paul Flores approached the group, offering to help since he was also leaving the party and lived in Santa Lucia Hall, closer to Kristen's dorm. Tim, who lived off campus, parted ways with the group once they reached the Cal Poly campus, leaving Cheryl, Paul, and Kristen to continue. Cheryl later noted Paul's odd behavior. He made frequent stops during the walk and seemed overly familiar with Kristen, holding her around the waist as she draped her arms around his neck. At one point, Paul suggested Cheryl go ahead, assuring her he'd catch up with Kristen. Cheryl hesitated but eventually agreed, double-checking with Paul to ensure he'd get Kristen safely to her dorm. Paul claimed he walked Kristen to the intersection of the hallways leading to their respective residence halls, parting ways around 2:30 a.m. That was the last time anyone reported seeing Kristen Smart. When Sunday passed without Kristen's usual call, Denise wasn't immediately alarmed. thinking the holiday weekend might have disrupted her daughter's routine. But Kristen's roommate and a neighbor found her absence unusual and contacted the University Police Department, UPD, to report her missing. Shockingly, no report was filed. Growing concerned, they reached out to Kristen's family and the San Luis Obispo Police Department. On May 27th, Denise received a call from the UPD asking if Kristen had returned home for the weekend. She hadn't. The UPD waited 3 days after Kristen's last sighting to file a missing persons report, a delay that would haunt the investigation. Kristen's roommate, Crystal Calvin, revealed that none of Kristen's personal belongings were missing, suggesting she never made it back to her room. Paul Flores, the last person seen with Kristen, quickly became a person of interest. 5 days after her disappearance, the UPD interviewed him. He claimed he and Kristen parted ways at the hallway intersection, each heading to their dorms. Investigators noticed a black eye on Paul's face, which he attributed to being elbowed during a basketball game. A friend later contradicted this, stating the black eye was present before the game and that Paul claimed he just woke up with it. A month later, in June, Paul was interviewed again and admitted lying about the basketball incident. He now claimed he hit his eye on a truck steering wheel while installing a car radio around 2 a.m. on May 27th, as he was preparing to sell the vehicle. The story sounded implausible, raising further suspicions. The Smart family's lawyer, James R. Murphy Jr., noted that Paul's injuries were consistent with an altercation, and his presence with Kristen after the party made him a focal point. On June 29, 1996, cadaver dogs were brought to Santa Lucia Hall to search for clues. 4 dogs, trained to detect human remains, were used individually to search the dorm. Each dog alerted to room 128, Paul Flores' room, specifically showing interest in the corner of a mattress Paul confirmed was his. The second handler, Gail LaRoque, recalled her boxer, Tori, repeatedly focusing on the left side of the room, Paul's side, indicating a strong scent but searching for its source. Despite this compelling evidence, no formal charges were filed, and Paul remained a free man, cloaked in suspicion. From 1996 to 2007, the investigation continued with searches of multiple properties owned by the Flores family, but none yielded results. Paul, advised by his lawyer, invoked his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent during a 1997 deposition, frustrating investigators. The Smarts filed a wrongful death lawsuit, but the court declined to proceed, citing the active criminal investigation. Paul and his family avoided public comment, though a former roommate, Derek Say, claimed Paul jokingly referenced Kristen's disappearance, allegations that remained speculative due to Paul's silence. 6 years after Kristen vanished, on May 25, 2002, with no remains found, Denise Smart described the moment as bittersweet, a painful acceptance of closure without answers. The case might have faded into obscurity if not for Chris Lambert, a local man haunted by Kristen's story. As an 8-year-old in 1996, Chris was frightened by the billboard on Arroyo Grande displaying Kristen's face, a constant reminder of her unsolved case. In 2018, driven by a passion for answers, he quit his job at a musical instrument shop to create a podcast, Your Own Backyard. With no formal training in law or journalism, Chris began asking questions, hoping to get people talking. In 2019, his persistence paid off. On February 20th, Kristen's birthday, Chris visited her memorial on Shell Beach, armed with a cell phone, waiting to meet someone willing to share. By chance, he encountered Denise Smart, and their conversation forged a strong bond. Together, they worked to amplify Kristen's story. Your Own Backyard exploded from a local series to a national phenomenon, amassing over 11 million downloads. Chris's knack for connecting with reluctant or overlooked witnesses uncovered critical allegations. A colleague of Paul's mother, Susan Flores, claimed Susan complained about sleepless nights after her husband received a late-night call during Memorial Day weekend. Leaving in his car, a tenant reported a daily 4:20 a.m. alarm sounding from the Flores backyard after Kristen's disappearance. And an Australian exchange student alleged seeing Kristen fighting off Paul that night. Chris's findings fueled theories that Paul's black eye resulted from a struggle with Kristen, that his father, Ruben Flores, helped cover up the crime, and that Kristen's body was buried in the Flores backyard. Disturbing reports also emerged of Paul's misconduct, with women accusing him of predatory behavior, harassment, and assault. An ex-girlfriend claimed he brandished a butter knife during a fight, and 13 others reported similar experiences. Despite 2 attempts to contact Paul, Chris received no response, though Susan Flores dismissed his investigation, claiming she could shoot plenty of holes in it. San Luis Obispo County Sheriff Ian Parkinson credited Chris's podcast with moving the investigation forward, encouraging witnesses to come forward. Denise Smart echoed this, saying the stars aligned when the podcast aired. On January 29, 2020, 2 trucks owned by Paul were seized as evidence. On February 5th, search warrants targeted 4 locations, including a brief detention of Paul during a search in Los Angeles. By April 22nd, items of interest, including date rape drugs and videos of Paul assaulting women, were retrieved from his San Pedro home. On February 11, 2021, Paul was arrested in Ranchos Palos Verdes for illegal firearm possession. In March, a search of Ruben Flores' home used cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar, towing away an older Volkswagen for evidence. On April 13, 2021, Paul and Ruben Flores were arrested by the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department. Paul was charged with murder, and Ruben as an accessory after the fact. A judge ruled in September 2021 that there was sufficient evidence for a trial, initially set for April 2022, but delayed and moved to Monterey County. The trial began on July 18, 2022, with Paul and Ruben tried separately but concurrently with different juries. Deputy District Attorney Chris Povrel painted a vivid picture of a young life lost, describing the Smarts' grief and Paul's evil. He cited evidence from Ruben's home suggesting both men were involved in Kristen's death and disposal. Paul's defense attorney, Robert Sanger, countered that no body or DNA evidence proved Kristen's fate, calling her presumed death a tragic situation without direct ties to Paul. The trial saw damning testimony. Women accused Paul of predatory behavior, with 2, referred to as Rhonda Doe and Sarah Doe, recounting waking up to Paul abusing them after feeling uncharacteristically drunk. Their graphic accounts moved jurors to tears, prompting Judge Jennifer O'Keefe to call a recess. Testimony about the search of Ruben's home caused another juror to break down, as investigators detailed graphic findings. A key witness, Jennifer Hudson, then 17, testified that Paul remarked he had buried Kristen beneath his skate ramp in Huasna during a public service announcement about her disappearance. Sanger challenged Hudson's credibility, citing her drug and alcohol use and delayed reporting, but prosecutors upheld her testimony. Hudson broke down, admitting she felt responsible for the Smarts' pain, believing her earlier silence prolonged their suffering. Court proceedings paused unexpectedly after her testimony, with no reason provided. As the trial continued through September 2022, the Smarts endured an emotional decades-long quest for truth. For other victims of Paul Flores, old wounds reopened, and for Chris Lambert, the pursuit of justice was finally underway. Kristen Smart, no longer just a face on a billboard, became a symbol of resilience, her story laid bare for the world to hear. The hope was that her killer would soon face accountability, allowing Kristen to rest in peace and her family to find some measure of closure after years of unrelenting grief. Sheila LaBar, born on July 4, 1958, in the small rural town of Fort Payne, Alabama, was a woman whose angelic appearance masked a chilling capacity for cruelty. The youngest of 3 children, Sheila grew up on a picturesque farm surrounded by cornfields, alongside her brother and sister Lynn. As a child, she was active, inquisitive, and open-hearted, with a creative streak that shone through her love for singing and performing. Her enchanting voice and charming looks made her the center of attention, and many believed she could have become a celebrated actress or singer. But the darkness of her upbringing and the horrors she endured twisted her path, leading her not to bright stages, but to the grim pages of criminal chronicles. Sheila's story raises a haunting question. Was she a born monster, or did the cruelty she faced in childhood forge her into one? Sheila's early years were marred by the unimaginable brutality of her father, Manuel Bailey, a man consumed by alcohol addiction. His binges transformed him into a beast who reveled in tormenting his family. Manuel's rages were unpredictable. He insulted and humiliated his wife and children, beat them with whatever was at hand, and sometimes threw them out into the night, locking the doors behind them. Sheila, her mother, and siblings were forced to huddle in the barn or sleep in the open fields, exposed to rain or frost. One particularly harrowing incident occurred when Manuel, in a drunken fury, hurled dishes and objects at his family. As Sheila's mother tried to shield her children, a flower pot struck young Sheila in the head, leaving her with a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she later concealed with her hair. But the physical abuse paled in comparison to the most horrific betrayal. Manuel, from an early age, forced Sheila and Lynn into sexual intimacy, a trauma their mother may have known about but never addressed. Despite this nightmare at home, Sheila excelled in school, her ambition burning bright. She dreamed of escaping the farm and conquering the big city, determined to realize her childhood aspirations of stardom. At 18, Sheila fled her parents' home, eager to embrace adulthood and leave her painful past behind. But the world outside was not the glittering escape she had envisioned. Her grades weren't strong enough for university, and she lacked the funds to move to a big city. Instead, she took a job as a maid at a hotel where her older sister, Lynn, was already employed. Sheila's striking beauty, big blue eyes, a captivating smile, and thick, flowing hair drew attention from men wherever she went. Over time, she learned to wield her charm as a tool, manipulating suitors to her advantage. In the late 1970s, she met Jonathan Baxter, a young man not yet 20, who had a daughter from a previous relationship. Their romance quickly led to marriage, but the union crumbled within months when Jonathan discovered Sheila had abused his daughter while he was at work. Devastated and unwilling to hear her explanations, he filed for divorce and evicted her, vowing never to see her again. After the divorce, Sheila drifted through a series of fleeting relationships, often living off the men she dated. These affairs lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, marked by her tendency to dominate and control her partners. In the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, and their tumultuous romance culminated in marriage. Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings, but the relationship was volatile, defined by infidelity, explosive arguments, and physical fights. Despite its toxicity, the marriage endured for over 3 years. In 1984, after yet another heated quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce, but Ronnie refused, not out of love but to provoke her. His taunts pushed Sheila to the edge. In a fit of rage, she consumed a dangerous mix of drugs and alcohol in front of him, then got behind the wheel of her car. Speeding recklessly, she lost consciousness, veered off the road, and crashed into a tree at high speed. Miraculously, she survived but suffered a severe head injury that left her in a coma for over a week. Doctors offered no prognosis, uncertain if she would ever wake. When Sheila finally regained consciousness, her recovery was slow and grueling. She was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she spent several months. Later, she confided in Lynn that an orderly had harassed her, possibly taking advantage of her sedated state. Upon her release, Sheila returned to Ronnie's home, but her behavior grew increasingly erratic and threatening. During one heated argument, she attacked him with nail scissors, jabbing them into his chest. Fearing for his safety, Ronnie filed for divorce and fled, leaving Sheila alone once more. With her second marriage dissolved, Sheila turned to the dating columns of print media, placing ads and seeking out new lovers. Her relationships remained short-lived, as her need to dominate and suppress her partners, both emotionally and physically, drove men away. Her striking photo in a dating section caught the eye of Wilfred "Bill" Labar, a 60-year-old widower with adult children and grandchildren. Bill, a wealthy chiropractor who owned a horse ranch in Epping, New Hampshire, was lonely and seeking a strong, vibrant companion. Sheila saw an opportunity in his wealth and set out to captivate him. She sent him provocative letters, accompanied by nude photos, which quickly won his affection. The trap worked, and Bill invited her to visit his ranch. Their romance blossomed rapidly, with Bill showering his young mistress with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved into his home, a decision that flattered the aging doctor, who relished parading his beautiful companion, young enough to be his daughter, in public. Bill had no intention of marrying Sheila, but she took matters into her own hands, adopting his surname and calling herself Sheila Labar. Surprised but unopposed, Bill allowed her to take control of his life. Sheila inserted herself into his business, finances, and property decisions, asserting dominance over every aspect of his world. As Bill aged, he could no longer satisfy her intimate needs, and according to Sheila, he permitted her to see other men, some of whom she brought to their shared home. By the mid-1990s, one of her regular lovers was Wayne Ennis, a Jamaican man much younger than Sheila. Initially hired as a ranch hand, Wayne soon moved into Bill's house, a move likely coerced by Sheila's influence over Bill. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne formalized their relationship, though the dynamics remained complex, with Bill still present in the household. Sheila's manipulative tendencies found a new outlet when she became an operator for intimate phone services, leveraging her enchanting voice to lure men. One such man was Kenny County, a 24-year-old with a gentle demeanor and a low IQ, making him highly gullible, the perfect target for Sheila's schemes. Kenny was deeply attached to his mother, but Sheila's cunning manipulation severed that bond. She seduced him with an unforgettable night of passion, promising a life of endless intimacy. Convinced he had found the woman of his dreams, Kenny informed his family and moved into Sheila's ranch. But the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Sheila revealed her true nature, transforming one of the ranch's rooms into a torture chamber. Intimate moments gave way to brutal beatings, leaving Kenny's body covered in bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. Despite the abuse, Sheila's psychological control kept him trapped, unable to leave or contact his loved ones. Neighbors began to notice Kenny's deteriorating condition, alarmed by his gaunt, sickly appearance. A local store clerk, disturbed by his state, took a photo of him days before his disappearance. The image, later used in court, showed a frail Kenny with massive bruises under his eyes, a swollen cheek, and a likely broken nose, evidence of prolonged, vicious beatings. His shopping cart contained 2 large canisters of fuel, a chilling hint at the fate Sheila had planned for him. Store employees, shaken by his appearance, reported possible domestic violence to the police, but Sheila evaded scrutiny and no charges were filed. Soon after, Kenny stopped contacting his family entirely. His worried mother visited the ranch, only to be met with Sheila's hostility and demands to leave Kenny alone. Desperate, the county family filed a missing persons report, alleging Kenny might be held against his will at Sheila's estate. When police arrived at the ranch, Sheila claimed Kenny no longer lived there, insisting he had fled to escape his terrifying mother's visits. As proof, she played an audio recording in which she asked Kenny if his mother had attacked him, and he quietly affirmed. The story seemed suspicious, and the next day, an officer secured a search warrant for the property. Sheila had long been on the police's radar, linked to another boyfriend's mysterious disappearance, but her home had never been searched. When officers arrived, Sheila was absent, but they noticed several fires burning near the outbuildings. The flames, fueled by a strange mix of mattresses, wooden furniture fragments, hay, and flammable liquid, drew their attention. Among the smoldering debris, they found bones that unmistakably appear human. The discovery prompted an urgent call for forensic experts, but what they uncovered next revealed the true horror of Sheila's actions. Bloodstains, poorly cleaned, were found throughout the house, so pervasive it seemed a massacre had occurred. Analysis confirmed the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones in the fire were identified as Kenny County's, confirming his gruesome fate. Sheila had orchestrated his torture, murder, and cremation, using the fuel he had unwittingly purchased. The scale of the evidence was staggering, painting a picture of a woman who had descended into depravity, using her charm to lure victims before subjecting them to unimaginable cruelty. In July 2008, Sheila Labar was found guilty of her crimes and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite defense attempts to argue she was insane and needed treatment, the court determined she was fully aware of her actions. All her appeals were rejected, and she now served her sentence at Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida. Wayne Ennis, her 3rd husband, later revealed that Sheila had repeatedly urged him to kill Bill Labar to seize his property, a plan he refused to enact. The voices of those who knew her described Sheila as crazy, unstable, and extremely violent, a stark contrast to the angelic facade she once projected. Sheila Labar's story is a chilling exploration of how trauma, ambition, and unchecked cruelty can intertwine to create a monster. From a scarred child dreaming of stardom to a calculating predator, her life serves as a grim reminder of the shadows that can lurk behind a captivating smile. Glennon Edward Engelman, a seemingly unremarkable dentist from St. Louis, Missouri, harbored a sinister secret beneath his professional facade. Born on February 6, 1927, in a city known for its Gateway Arch, Engelman's life appeared ordinary, a family man with a dental practice, a wife, and a son. But from 1958 to 1980, he orchestrated a series of calculated murders driven by greed, using his charm and cunning to manipulate accomplices and eliminate victims for insurance payouts. His crimes, spanning over 2 decades, claimed at least 7 lives, leaving a trail of devastation across Missouri and Illinois. The unraveling of Engelman's schemes, largely due to the testimony of his ex-wife, revealed a man whose cold-blooded pursuit of wealth knew no bounds, earning him a place among America's most chilling serial killers. Engelman's descent into crime began in the late 1950s, when financial pressures and a thirst for easy money pushed him beyond the confines of his dental practice. In 1958, he saw an opportunity in James Stanley Bullock, a 27-year-old mechanic engaged to Engelman's dental assistant, Olga Duncan. Olga, ambitious and easily swayed, became Engelman's pawn in a deadly plot. Engelman, aware of a $6,000 life insurance policy on Bullock, equivalent to about $60,000 today, convinced Olga to marry him to secure the payout. On December 3, 1958, Engelman lured Bullock to a secluded spot in St. Louis, where he shot him in the head with a .38 caliber revolver. To cover his tracks, he staged the scene to look like a robbery, planting a stolen wallet nearby. Olga, feigning grief, collected the insurance money, which she shared with Engelman. The police, misled by the staged evidence, closed the case as an unsolved robbery homicide, unaware of the dentist's involvement. Engelman's success emboldened him, and he began to see murder as a lucrative side business. In 1962, he targeted Eric Fry, a 32-year-old partner in the Arco Dental Laboratory where Engelman had invested. Fry had taken out a $7,000 life insurance policy, naming his wife Barbara as the beneficiary. Engelman, who had befriended the couple, saw a chance to profit. He persuaded Barbara, whom he had seduced into an affair, to participate in a scheme to kill Fry for the insurance money. On August 14, 1963, Engelman and Barbara lured Fry to a drag strip in St. Charles County, Missouri, under the pretense of inspecting a potential investment. There, Engelman shot Fry in the back of the head, leaving his body in the grass. Barbara played the role of the grieving widow, collecting the insurance payout, which she split with Engelman. The police, unable to connect the dots, treated Fray's death as another unsolved case, allowing Engelman to evade suspicion. By the early 1970s, Engelman's schemes grew more elaborate, involving a wider net of accomplices. In 1976, he set his sights on Peter J. Halm, a 26-year-old employee at a service station Engelman frequented. Halm had recently married Sophie Marie Barrera, a woman Engelman knew from his dental practice. Engelman learned that Sophie's family owned a farm in Pacific, Missouri, and that Halm had a $10,000 life insurance policy. Sensing an opportunity, Engelman befriended Halm, gaining his trust. On September 20, 1976, Engelman invited Halm to the farm under the guise of a hunting trip. As they walked through the fields, Engelman handed Halm a package he claimed was dental equipment, instructing him to hold it. Unbeknownst to Halm, the package contained a bomb rigged with dynamite. Engelman detonated it remotely, killing Halm instantly in a fiery explosion. Sophie, unaware of Engelman's role, collected the insurance money, part of which Engelman funneled to himself through a fabricated business deal. The police, puzzled by the explosion, initially ruled it an accident, suspecting Halm had mishandled explosives. Engelman's tracks remained covered. Engelman's most audacious plot targeted the Gusewell family, whose wealth and insurance policies made them prime targets. In 1977, he focused on Arthur Gusewell, a 35-year-old farmer, and his wife Carol, who lived on a sprawling property in Edwardsville, Illinois. Engelman, through his dental practice, had met Ronald Gusewell, Arthur's brother, and learned of the family's substantial assets. He devised a plan to kill Arthur and Carol, framing it to collect their life insurance policies, worth over $50,000. Engelman recruited Robert Handy, a handyman who worked odd jobs for him, to assist. On November 24, 1977, Engelman and Handy drove to the Gusewell farm. Engelman lured Arthur outside, claiming to discuss a business opportunity, while Handy waited in the shadows. As Arthur stepped onto the porch, Engelman shot him twice in the chest with a silenced pistol. Carol, hearing the commotion, ran outside, only to be gunned down by Handy. To ensure no witnesses, Engelman ordered Handy to shoot the couple's dog, a loyal companion that barked frantically. The killers fled, leaving the bodies in the cold November air. The Gus Ewell murders sent shockwaves through Edwardsville, but Engelman's meticulous planning kept him out of reach. He had ensured the insurance policies were paid to a trust he controlled through an accomplice, diverting suspicion. The police, stumped by the lack of forensic evidence, struggled to identify suspects. Engelman, emboldened by his success, targeted Ronald Gus Ewell, Arthur's brother, in 1979. Ronald, 38, had inherited part of the family estate and held a $25,000 life insurance policy. Engelman, using his charm, convinced Ronald to meet him at a remote quarry in Madison County, Illinois, under the pretense of a real estate deal. On June 12, 1979, Engelman shot Ronald in the head, dumping his body in the quarry. The insurance payout was funneled through another accomplice, keeping Engelman's hands clean. The police, still grappling with the earlier Gus Ewell murders, failed to link Ronald's death to the dentist. Engelman's final known victim was Sophie Marie Barrera, the widow of Peter Hom. By 1980, Sophie, now 38, had become a liability. She had grown suspicious of Engelman's involvement in her husband's death, especially after noticing inconsistencies in his stories about the accident. Engelman, sensing her doubts, decided to silence her permanently. He enlisted Robert Handy again, promising a share of Sophie's $15,000 life insurance policy. On March 5, 1980, Engelman lured Sophie to her farm in Pacific, Missouri, claiming he needed her signature on a dental contract. As Sophie entered the barn, Handy ambushed her, striking her with a tire iron before Engelman shot her in the head. They buried her body in a shallow grave on the property, covering it with lime to hasten decomposition. The insurance money was collected by an accomplice, who passed a portion to Engelman. Sophie's disappearance went unreported for weeks, as she had few close relatives to notice her absence. Engelman's empire of crime began to crumble when his ex-wife, Ruth Engelman, decided to break her silence. Ruth, who had married Engelman in the 1950s and had a son with him, was aware of his manipulative tendencies but had stayed quiet during their marriage. After their divorce in the early 1970s, she remained in contact, occasionally hearing boasts about his business ventures. By 1980, Ruth, now living in Chicago, grew uneasy about Engelman's activities, especially after hearing rumors of missing people connected to him. Fearing for her safety and driven by guilt, she contacted the St. Louis Police Department, offering to share what she knew. Her testimony was explosive. She detailed Engelman's insurance scams, naming victims like James Bullock, Eric Fry, Peter Hom, the Guswells, and Sophie Barrera. She described how Engelman recruited accomplices, staged murders to look like accidents or robberies, and funneled money through trusts and fake businesses. Ruth's cooperation was pivotal, providing investigators with a roadmap they needed to piece together Engelman's crimes. Armed with Ruth's information, the police launched a multi-jurisdictional investigation, focusing on Engelman's financial records and connections to the victims. They interviewed Robert Handy, who, under pressure, confessed to his role in the Gus Ewell and Barrera murders, implicating Engelman as the mastermind. Handy's testimony corroborated Ruth's, detailing Engelman's use of guns, bombs, and accomplices to execute his plans. The police also re-examined the deaths of James Bullock and Eric Fry, uncovering financial trails linking Engelman to the insurance payouts. In late 1980, Engelman was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and fraud. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial documents, witness testimonies, and forensic re-examinations of crime scenes painted a damning picture. During his trial in 1981, Engelman maintained a stoic demeanor, denying any involvement and claiming his accomplices had acted independently. Prosecutors, however, presented a meticulous case, highlighting his greed-driven motives and the chilling precision of his schemes. Ruth's testimony was particularly devastating, as she recounted his boasts about easy money and his lack of remorse. The jury, horrified by the scope of his crimes, convicted Engelman on 7 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never walk free. Robert Handy, as part of a plea deal, received a reduced sentence for testifying against Engelman, though he still faced decades in prison. Engelman was incarcerated at the Menard Correctional Center in Illinois, where he spent the rest of his life. He remained unrepentant, refusing to express remorse or provide closure to the victims' families. On March 3, 1999, at the age of 72, Engelman died in prison of natural causes, taking any untold secrets to his grave. His death marked the end of a dark chapter, but for the families of James Bullock, Eric Fry, Peter Halm, Arthur and Carol Gasuel, Ronald Gasuel, and Sophie Barrera, the pain endured. They grieved not only the loss of their loved ones, but also the betrayal of a man who hid his monstrous nature behind a professional smile. The case of Glennon Engelman exposed the chilling reality of a killer who used his intellect and charm to exploit trust for profit. His crimes, driven by a relentless pursuit of wealth, left an indelible mark on St. Louis, a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. The courage of Ruth Engelman and the persistence of investigators ensured justice was served, but the scars of his actions remain, a testament to the devastating cost of greed unchecked. In the summer of 2003, a chilling discovery in a field near Tremont, Illinois, marked the beginning of a grim chapter for the communities of Peoria and Tazewell counties. The body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne, a black woman known to support a drug habit through prostitution, was found abandoned in the tall grass. The initial autopsy failed to pinpoint a cause of death, leading some detectives to speculate she had overdosed. But one investigator's unease lingered, a gut feeling that something more sinister was at play. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies surfaced over the next year, revealing the work of a serial killer who preyed on vulnerable black women struggling with addiction. The hunt for this predator, later identified as Larry Bright, would expose a trail of violence, loss, and the community's fight to honor the humanity of the victims dismissed as mere statistics. The first victim, Sabrina Payne, was discovered on July 27, 2003, just 2 days after she was last seen at her home. Her body, left in a remote field, bore no obvious signs of trauma, and the inconclusive autopsy left investigators puzzled. Some dismissed her death as a tragic but unsurprising consequence of her lifestyle, but one detective couldn't shake the feeling that her case deserved closer scrutiny. His instincts proved correct when, on February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. Partially clothed and lying face down in the snow, Barbara had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the previous night. An autopsy revealed multiple contusions and abrasions on her body, and toxicology reports showed fatal levels of cocaine in her system. Despite these findings, police hesitated to label her death a murder or entertain the possibility of a serial killer targeting black women involved in the drug trade and sex work. As the months passed, more women vanished, raising alarm among their families and communities. In October 2004, 32-year-old Shaka Thomas was reported missing after not being seen since August. Known to disappear for stretches, her prolonged absence prompted her family to alert authorities. Similarly, Shirley Trapp was reported missing in late summer 2004, last seen 3 days before her family filed a report. Tamara Walls vanished in September 2004, with no sightings for 3 weeks. All 3 women were black, known to support crack cocaine habits through prostitution, and their disappearances followed a troubling pattern. Another woman, 36-year-old Laura Lawler, a mother of 8, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and a woman. Her longtime partner, the father of her 7 daughters and 1 son, described Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. He searched tirelessly for her, learning only that she had been with a man named Larry before she vanished. Laura had struggled with crack cocaine addiction, a vulnerability that may have made her a target. On September 25, 2004, the body of Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County, nude and discarded along the roadside. Like the others, Linda was part of Peoria's drug scene, her life intertwined with the same struggles as the other victims. By this point, the pattern was undeniable, and police acknowledged the likelihood of a serial killer stalking black women in the Peoria area. A task force was formed to investigate, though one detective later remarked that the response would have been swifter if the victims had been white women. Despite their efforts, the case remained elusive, with no clear suspect in sight. The violence continued unabated. On October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington, Illinois. Nude, with an autopsy revealing strangulation and blunt force trauma to her head, Brenda also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for her safety, knowing she was connected to many of the women who had been killed or gone missing. Brenda's struggle with drug addiction had made her vulnerable, but her family refused to let her be defined solely by it. The task force, now working around the clock, followed thousands of leads, but the killer remained a shadow, slipping through their grasp. The breakthrough came in December 2004, when 35-year-old Vicky Bomer was arrested for theft. From her jail cell, she reached out to authorities, claiming she could help identify the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. Vicky recounted a terrifying encounter from July 2004, when a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home in Peoria. They shared alcohol and drugs, but once she was intoxicated, Bright attacked her, attempting to rape her and pulling a knife. Somehow, Vicky managed to escape, a rare survivor of his violence. Initially, police were skeptical. Vicky was asking for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony, and she hadn't reported the incident earlier. She explained her silence was due to fear of arrest for outstanding warrants, a claim verified by her criminal history. Intrigued, the investigators decided to look into Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born on July 8, 1966, in Peoria, Illinois. His life had taken a dark turn after a 2-year prison stint at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to his family, the experience changed him, fueling anger and violence. An injury led to an addiction to prescription opioids, which spiraled into crack cocaine use. Bright also developed an obsession with pornography, particularly featuring black women, a detail that would later align with his choice of victims. Living with his mother in a small guest house behind her home, Bright cultivated a beautiful garden bed of flowers for her, a stark contrast to the horrors he would commit. When police arrived at his home following Vicky's tip, they noted the vibrant blooms, an eerie facade masking the darkness within. Bright was arrested for the unlawful restraint of Vicky Bomer and questioned about the murders. He denied any knowledge of the killed or missing women, maintaining a calm demeanor throughout the interrogation. As he smoked several cigarettes, detectives planned to collect one for DNA testing, but Bright thwarted them by eating the butts before leaving the room. He also refused to provide a DNA sample voluntarily, heightening suspicions. On January 20, 2005, police searched Bright's home, digging up his meticulously tended garden. The excavation uncovered small bone fragments and ashes, later confirmed to be human remains. Confronted with the news that his mother's flowers were being unearthed, Bright's composure cracked. Overwhelmed, he broke down and confessed to multiple murders, even leading investigators to the remains of some victims. Bright's confessions painted a horrifying picture. He admitted to picking up Sabrina Payne on Peoria's south side around July 27, 2003. After driving her to his home, they drank and used cocaine before engaging in consensual sex. But Bright claimed he became enraged, believing Sabrina was trying to steal from him. In a fit of rage, he strangled her to death and dumped her body in the cornfield where she was found. He recounted a similar encounter with Barbara Williams in February 2004. After sharing drugs and alcohol, he accused her of theft, lost control, and killed her, leaving her body along the road where it was discovered the next day. The prosecution believed that after these first 2 murders, Bright developed a bloodlust, his killings becoming deliberate hunts. "I knew them," he said chillingly. "I would tell the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Bright confessed to killing Laura Lawler, burning her body in his backyard fire pit and burying the remains in his mother's yard to avoid detection. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley and Trapp and Shaka Thomas, disposing of their ashes similarly. Tamara Walls met the same fate, her remains reduced to fragments in his makeshift crematorium. Bright attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenda Irving as well, but adverse weather forced him to abandon the efforts, dumping their bodies roadside instead. His methodical destruction of evidence earned him the grim nickname the Bone Crusher, a testament to his efforts to erase his crimes. Facing the death penalty after his January 2005 arrest, Bright sought to spare his mother the public humiliation of a trial. In a plea deal to avoid execution, he pleaded guilty on May 30, 2006. to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide. The murders were not deemed racially motivated. Detectives believe Bright's attraction to black women drove his victim selection, making him one of the few serial killers to target victims outside his race. He was sentenced to 7 concurrent life sentences without parole, plus an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. The plea deal required him to serve 100% of his sentence, ensuring he would never walk free. Larry Bright is currently incarcerated at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois, where he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. For the families of Bright's victims, his conviction brought little solace. They fought to ensure the women he killed were remembered not as drug addicts or prostitutes, but as mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends, human beings with lives and stories cut short by a predator. Sabrina Payne's loved ones spoke of her warmth, despite her struggles. Barbara Williams' family cherished her resilience, even as addiction gripped her. Laura Lawler's partner mourned the vibrant soul who brought joy to their 8 children. Brenda Irving's children grieved a mother who loved them fiercely, despite her demons. Shirley and Trapp, Shaka Thomas, Tamara Walls, and Linda Neal were all mourned by those who knew their hearts, not just their hardships. The Peoria community, shaken by the losses, vowed to honor their memory, refusing to let their lives be reduced to the circumstances of their deaths. Larry Bright's reign of terror left an indelible scar on central Illinois, a reminder of the vulnerability of those society often overlooks. The task force's eventual success, spurred by Vicky Bomer's courage, brought justice, but the pain of the families endures, a testament to the profound human cost of his crimes. The pursuit of personal happiness and a better life is often a long, arduous journey, fraught with challenges and unpredictable outcomes. For many, this quest leads them to distant countries or even across oceans, driven by dreams of a brighter future. But sometimes, instead of finding the joy they seek, they encounter pain, despair, disillusionment, or even death. In chasing such dreams, it's vital to remain mindful of those around us. The story of Nancy Ruiz Gores, a young Guatemalan woman, has become one of the most haunting cases in Spain in recent years. A mother of 2, she left Central America to cross the Atlantic in search of work that could provide a decent life for her daughters and support her aging parents. Tragically, she never returned home. Fragments of her disfigured, unrecognizable body were found with great difficulty in desolate, nearly impassable areas. At the time of her murder, she was 4 months pregnant, and the perpetrator was someone she had hoped to build a life with. Little is known about the early years of Nancy Ruiz Gores. Born on April 13, 1991, in a small village called Granada in the Republic of Guatemala, Nancy was the second of 5 children in an impoverished family. Her parents, Jorge and Pena Gores, struggled to make ends meet, but they poured their hearts into ensuring their children received a good education, hoping it would lift them out of poverty. Despite their financial hardships, they instilled in Nancy a drive to succeed. After finishing high school, Nancy enrolled at a university in the city of Villanueva, where she studied business administration and document management. She was a diligent student, graduating with honors, a testament to her determination and intellect. Yet, despite her academic achievements, significant career opportunities eluded her. During her studies, she worked as a cashier in a large supermarket, and later, she was promoted to an administrative role. But her career stalled there, offering little hope for advancement. During her university years, Nancy lived in an unregistered marriage with a young man whose name remains absent from public records. Together, they had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, the relationship crumbled and the couple separated. The father of her girls lost interest in their lives, offering no financial or emotional support. Nancy returned to her parents' home with her daughters, continuing her job at the supermarket. The family barely scraped by, with money only covering the essentials. The lack of prospects weighed heavily on Nancy, and she knew something had to change. In 2013, Nancy's older sister immigrated to the United States, where she quickly found a good job, married, and settled into a stable life. Inspired by her sister's success, Nancy resolved to transform her own life. She chose Europe as her destination, settling on sunny Spain, a place she believed held promise. However, at the time, she lacked the funds even for a one-way plane ticket, let alone the expenses needed to start new. For several years, Nancy worked tirelessly, saving every penny she could. By July 2018, at the age of 27, she had enough to buy a ticket to Madrid. She promised her parents she would stay in constant contact to ease their worries. Her plan was to find housing and a job upon arrival, carrying a few €1,000, enough to rent a room, cover food, and meet basic needs until she secured steady income. Her daughters, aged 7 and 5, remained in Guatemala with their grandparents. Nancy's time in Madrid was brief. After a short stint there, she moved to Barcelona and eventually settled in Ciudad Real, the capital of the Spanish province of the same name. She called home almost daily, checking on her family's well-being and sending money regularly. These funds not only supported her parents and daughters, but also allowed them to renovate their aging home. Nancy shared that she didn't have a stable, official job, instead making ends meet through odd jobs like cleaning wealthy homes or caring for the elderly and sick. She never complained about the challenges, instead emphasizing that Europe offered opportunities she could never have found in Guatemala. Even working around the clock back home, she couldn't have earned as much. To her family, she seemed content with her new life, even speaking of one day bringing her daughters to Spain once she saved enough to rent a spacious, comfortable home for them all. For a while, Nancy kept her personal life private, claiming her demanding work left no time for romance. But in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about a new relationship. She had met a man named Carlos Andres Bustamante, whom she encountered by chance while searching for new rental housing. As they worked together to resolve her housing needs, their connection deepened, and they soon began living together. Carlos, a year older than Nancy, was unemployed at the start of their relationship, relying on sporadic small jobs. Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering rent, bills, and often giving Carlos money for his personal expenses. Yet she never spoke ill of this arrangement to her family, leading her parents to believe she was happy and had found a good partner. By this time, Nancy's two younger brothers had also moved to Spain, and she maintained close contact with them, especially her youngest brother, Dennis. Dennis even met Carlos and found him likable. In late June 2020, Nancy and Carlos relocated to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. During a phone call, Nancy told her family the climate was warmer and more favorable there, and she saw better job prospects. However, she hinted at growing difficulties in her relationship with Carlos, though she avoided delving into details. Carlos, it turned out, was jealous, temperamental, and at times cruel. He lacked ambition, content to live off Nancy's earnings. More alarmingly, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used illegal drugs, despite tearful promises to quit and find steady work. Nancy began to question whether she could continue her life with him, especially after discovering she was pregnant. Carlos was initially thrilled by the news, vowing to change for the better. But his behavior only worsened. He continued drinking and using drugs, taking money from Nancy or borrowing from his mother. Worse still, he began physically abusing her, a fact she tried to conceal from those around her. On the evening of August 12, 2020, while Nancy was video chatting with her parents, they overheard Carlos shouting and berating her, demanding to know who she was speaking with. He didn't believe her when she said it was her mother, snatching the phone from her hands. After confirming the truth by glancing at the screen, he tossed the device onto a chair and stormed off. The next day, the scene repeated itself. Carlos again grabbed the phone during a call with her parents and daughters, insisting on seeing who she was talking to. He insulted her and even threatened harm. A frightened Nancy later downplayed the incidents to her relatives, explaining that Carlos was simply overly jealous and assuring them she could handle it. Her parents urged her to contact the police, but she insisted she had the situation under control. On August 17th, during a candid phone conversation with her sister, Nancy made a chilling statement. If anything happened to her or if she suddenly died, Carlos would be solely to blame. Her words were ominous, but she refused to elaborate, only asking her sister to care for her daughters if needed. This was the last time her sister heard Nancy's voice. On August 20th, 2020, around 2 p.m., Nancy sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening. She never did, nor did she call the next day, which was highly unusual. She stopped responding to her family's calls, and attempts to reach Carlos were equally fruitless. His phone went unanswered. Since the couple had recently moved to Santander and had no local friends, and Nancy's brothers were far away in another part of Spain, the situation grew increasingly alarming. A few days later, a strange message arrived from Carlos's phone, claiming he and Nancy had argued and decided to part ways. It stated that Nancy had packed her things and left to find a separate apartment, was ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers urged Carlos to meet them in Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with the police. Carlos agreed readily, but predictably never showed up. He didn't file a report and soon stopped communicating with Igor's family entirely. Nancy's relatives reported her disappearance to the police themselves. Meanwhile, through Nancy's friends, her brothers located the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, introduced themselves, and explained the situation, Sandra broke down in tears. She confessed that she had long suspected her son was capable of doing something terrible to Nancy, but offered no further details. Sandra had no idea where her son or Nancy were, as Carlos wasn't answering her calls, only sending brief messages asking her to give him time and not ask questions. She admitted she liked Nancy but knew her son's volatile nature all too well and feared what he might do. The next day, Sandra was summoned for questioning at the police station. Investigators wanted to discuss Nancy's disappearance and determine Carlos's possible whereabouts. Sandra reiterated what she had told Nancy's brothers, showing police a lengthy text message Nancy had sent her days before vanishing. In the message, Nancy begged Sandra never to give Carlos money, no matter how convincing his sob stories were. She explained that he spent it all on alcohol and drugs, under the influence of which he became aggressive and cruel. Nancy described Carlos as having no desire to find work or address his addictions, and his behavior was growing increasingly threatening. She was considering leaving him, ended the message by saying it was better to end things now before anyone got hurt. Another disturbing revelation emerged. Carlos had a criminal history. He had several prior convictions for causing bodily harm, including a brutal assault on his own mother when he was just 17. At the time, he received probation, but later, after leaving home, he served short sentences for attacking women he lived with or attempted to form relationships with. As the investigation began, startling details about Nancy's life surfaced, painting a grim picture of her relationship with Carlos. Friends revealed that Nancy wasn't merely a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had told her parents. Cleaning houses and caring for the elderly couldn't have generated the substantial sum she sent home monthly. Instead, the slender, dark-haired Guatemalan with striking beauty worked as an escort, providing services to wealthy Spaniards and tourists alike. Her move to the resort city of Santander was strategic, offering more opportunities to earn through this line of work. Carlos was aware of Nancy's occupation and initially accepted it, as it relieved him of the need to work while she supported them both. However, when Nancy became pregnant, his attitude shifted. He grew tormented by doubts about whether he was the father, suspecting the child might belong to one of her clients. Nancy continued working despite her pregnancy, which fueled his jealousy. Carlos oscillated between forbidding her from meeting other men and pressuring her to work when her money ran low. The money he took from his mother was spent solely on his addictions, leaving Nancy to bear the financial burden. For nearly a week, neither Nancy nor Carlos could be located. Carlos responded only with vague messages, never revealing his whereabouts. It wasn't until August 26th that police obtained a warrant to search the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. What they found was shocking, leaving no doubt that Nancy was no longer alive. Blood traces were everywhere, on the floors, walls, and furniture. Some attempts had been made to clean them, but most were glaringly visible. In the clogged drains of the bathroom and toilet, investigators discovered fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed these belonged to Nancy, though her remains were not found in the apartment itself. The scene suggested she had been brutally killed and dismembered in the bathroom, with her remains disposed of elsewhere. Among the evidence was a package from a small hatchet purchased at a local hardware store. The hatchet itself was missing, but Carlos's clear fingerprints were on the packaging. Security footage from the store showed that on August 20th, Carlos had bought the hatchet a pair of sturdy rubber gloves, and large trash bags. At a nearby market, he purchased a small cart from an elderly vendor who later identified him from a photo. The day after the grim discoveries, Carlos unexpectedly turned himself in at a Madrid police station, claiming he was reporting Nancy missing. His attempt to deflect suspicion failed, and he was immediately arrested as the prime suspect. Carlos insisted he had nothing to do with Nancy's disappearance, saying they had argued and parted ways on August 20th. He claimed he left town in a fit of emotion and was unaware of what happened afterward, suggesting someone might have attacked Nancy when she returned to the apartment. His story was implausible, especially after police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. In the following days, police searched nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with divers, but no trace of Nancy was found. They then tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th using his mobile phone signals. He had spent 3 days traveling along the coast, visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid, clearly attempting to cover his tracks. It seemed unlikely he would travel with a dismembered body, so the search focused on Santander. Street surveillance footage showed that on the evening of August 20th, Carlos walked toward a large natural forest park. He returned to the apartment late at night, then left again with a cart filled with oddly shaped bags. Few cameras covered the park, but footage captured him entering the wooded area and later reappearing with a noticeably lighter cart. He then headed toward railway tracks, beyond which lay a steep bush-covered cliff, returning much lighter, indicating where to search for Nancy's remains. On September 16th, bags containing highly decomposed human remains were found in thick underbrush on the hillside. These were identified as Nancy's, divided into 20 parts with a hatchet. According to security footage, everything Carlos transported in the cart was recovered, but something was missing. Nancy, 4 months pregnant, should have had a fetus, yet it was absent from the bags. The condition of her genitals and lower abdomen showed merciless mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting Carlos had extracted the fetus and disposed of it separately. Carlos consistently denied involvement, offering conflicting statements and blaming an unknown assailant. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothing and shoes, which he had tried but failed to wash clean. Investigators pieced together the tragic events. Forensic experts determined that on the afternoon of August 20th, following an argument, Carlos brutally beat and strangled Nancy in the kitchen, where blood was found on the floor and walls. He then moved her body to the bathroom and went shopping for the hatchet, gloves, and bags. In the bathroom, he dismembered her body into 20 parts using the hatchet and a large kitchen knife, placed the pieces into bags, and loaded them into the cart. Late that night, he took the cart to the park, scattering the bags in secluded spots, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus Carlos removed remains unknown. He denied guilt, claiming he loved Nancy. From the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid, he lived off money stolen from her, spending it daily in bars across various cities. The investigation, evidence collection, and witness interviews took nearly 2 years. Carlos's trial began in July 2022, and in November, he was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. Many considered his sentence too lenient, 25.5 years in prison, with an order to pay 50,000 euros in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. Nancy's story echoes the biblical tale of Cain and Abel, where jealousy and rage led to a brother's murder. In her case, unhealthy jealousy and a toxic relationship ended in unimaginable tragedy, leaving her family shattered and her dreams unfulfilled. The end of June 2010 was a harrowing time for the family of Donna and Samuel Eckert. Their 19-year-old son, Sean, had gone missing. The night before, Sean had a heated argument with his older brother, Stanley, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Sean had never been one to disappear for long without his phone or letting his mother know his whereabouts. As the night wore on, his absence alarmed the entire family, but the official search for the young man didn't begin until 24 hours later. Missing person notices, featuring photos of a smiling, blonde-haired Sean, were posted at train stations, supermarkets, and along the streets. Yet, even after 2 days of searching, there were no leads. The police seemed at a loss, their hands tied as they continued their efforts. Meanwhile, Sean Paul Eckerd remained officially missing. Relatives, acquaintances, and a few friends formed a team of volunteers who tirelessly combed local establishments, interviewed passers-by, and meticulously reconstructed Sean's movements from that fateful night. The police, while not halting their search, began delving deeper into the habits and dynamics of the Eckerd family to piece together the sequence of events leading to Sean's disappearance. Donna and Samuel Eckerd were a married couple with a complex history of family relationships. Both had children from previous marriages, and after navigating difficulties in their earlier unions, they found solace in each other. They settled in San Diego, California, renting a spacious family home and attending the local church every weekend without fail. The family was devout, living a quiet, somewhat insular lifestyle. A few years after moving in together, they welcomed their first son, Stanley, followed 2 years later by Sean. Donna devoted herself entirely to raising her sons and maintaining the home, ensuring the brothers grew up surrounded by love and care. They attended a reputable local school, and weekends were reserved for church activities. The Eckerds' older children, having reached adulthood, had moved out to start their own families across the continent. Despite the distance, the family remained close, keeping in regular contact and reuniting for holidays. Sean was a vibrant, fun-loving boy with a bright appearance, charisma, and an empathetic nature that drew people to him like a magnet. He had a knack for listening and connecting with others, making friends effortlessly. Stanley, by contrast, was more reserved, cautious of new experiences, and shy, which made socializing more challenging for him. Despite their differences, the brothers shared a common group of friends and classmates, and their 2-year age gap didn't hinder their bond. They were like two halves of a whole, always supporting and looking out for each other. Their parents fostered a household where respect was paramount, raising their children with a strong faith in God and adherence to biblical principles. As the brothers grew older, their interests began to diverge. Sean, the younger, threw himself into music, playing in a school band and filling his life with creative energy. Stanley, the elder, became passionate about martial arts, dedicating himself to physical discipline. Their evenings at home were filled with vivid stories of their respective pursuits. Sean's tales of music, friends, and future plans often dominated the family's pre-dinner conversations. Everyone listened, captivated by his enthusiasm. Stanley, however, felt overshadowed. His quieter nature and lack of grandiose aspirations left him with little to share, and he often sat silently, absorbing his brother's stories. To him, it seemed there was no room for his own voice. One evening, Sean shared exciting news with the family. He had met a neighbor girl named Mary Jane, a delicate young woman with bright brown eyes and long blonde hair. Sean was smitten. He had heard her playing the piano through an open window, and drawn to the music, he entered her house without knocking. His confidence and charm helped him navigate the awkward introduction, and they quickly struck up a friendship. Sean, the life of any gathering, began organizing picnics where Mary Jane was a frequent guest. They spent hours walking through parks and visiting observation decks, their connection blossoming into a budding adolescent romance. But life's harsh realities soon intervened. The Eckerd family received devastating news. Donna's elderly mother, Sean, and Stanley's grandmother had fallen seriously ill. After much deliberation, the family decided to relocate to be near her. The move was a difficult one, particularly for Sean, who was deeply attached to his friends, his band, and Mary Jane. Despite his reluctance, the decision was final. In 2005, the Eckerds left San Diego and settled in their grandmother's home in the small town of Spring Hill, Florida, starting anew. The move to Spring Hill was like a breath of fresh air for the family, offering a chance to support their ailing grandmother. For Sean, however, it was a heartbreak. He missed his band, his walks with Mary Jane, and the vibrant life he'd known in San Diego. Yet, his resilient spirit couldn't stay down for long. He adapted to his new surroundings, finding ways to fill his life with meaning. Donna and Samuel secured jobs at the local Presbyterian church, where Donna cared for children in the nursery and Samuel assisted with upkeep. The brothers grew close again, making new friends together at their new school. Sean rejoined his school band, while Stanley enrolled in a martial arts school just blocks from their home. Despite his busy schedule, Sean's thoughts remained with Mary Jane. Every night after class, he'd lock himself in his room, talking to her on the phone for hours, promising to visit once he had his parents' permission. While Sean nurtured his long-distance love, Stanley struggled to find his place. His reserved nature and perceived lack of parental attention left him feeling isolated. In a bid for self-expression, he made a series of poor choices that would have dire consequences. In May 2006, Stanley announced to his parents that he planned to drop out of school to focus on martial arts and start a martial arts club. His youthful ambition led him into bad company, where he dabbled in petty fraud and experimented with illegal drugs. By 2007, these associations landed him in trouble with the law. He was arrested for stealing and charged with felony fraud-related offenses. The news of Stanley's actions devastated Donna, who suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized. The situation was resolved quickly, thanks to a lawyer hired by Donna's sister, Jennifer. The lawyer successfully argued a lack of direct evidence, securing Stanley a suspended sentence. The ordeal left Stanley shaken and guilt-ridden, causing him to withdraw further, yearning for his family's understanding and acceptance. Meanwhile, Sean, shaken by his brother's troubles, kept his own plans quiet. During the summer vacation, he took a job as a waiter, saving money to visit Mary Jane in California. Without telling his parents, he left a note for his mother and embarked on a 2-day bus ride to reunite with his love. The journey felt endless, but the thought of seeing Mary Jane kept him going. When the bus finally stopped, Sean spotted her through the window, her long hair tucked behind her ears. Their reunion was filled with joy, reminiscent of their high school days. They went on picnics, and Sean confessed his love, which Mary Jane reciprocated. But their happiness was short-lived. During a walk, Sean suddenly felt faint, his vision darkening as he collapsed. He was rushed to a hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with tick-borne encephalitis, a condition that rapidly worsened, causing brain inflammation. Sean slipped into a coma, and for over a month, doctors fought to save him. After 6 months of grueling rehabilitation, he returned to Florida, where Jennifer had brought him home. The recovery was arduous, but with Donna's meticulous care, monitoring his diet and exercise, Sean made a full recovery. Stanley, however, harbored growing resentment. He felt overlooked as the family rallied around Sean, and his jealousy festered quietly. By 2009, Sean had regained his strength and returned to his music studies, dreaming of reuniting with Mary Jane and introducing her to his parents. But his plans were derailed when Stanley introduced him to Samantha Rowe, a Florida native who quickly bonded with both brothers. Stanley was smitten with Samantha, showering her with attention, but she was drawn to Sean's cheerful, sociable nature. For a time, Stanley courted Samantha, and their romantic outings culminated in a passionate kiss. He was elated, believing he had won her heart. Unbeknownst to Stanley, Samantha sent Sean a message confessing her feelings for him and inviting him for a walk. Sean, loyal to Mary Jane, agreed to the outing but made it clear he wasn't interested romantically. They spent the evening strolling along the waterfront, discussing Stanley and Mary Jane. Feeling rejected, Samantha messaged Stanley, falsely claiming that Sean had been pursuing her and that she was interested in him too. Stanley was furious. That evening, he confronted Sean in his room. Their conversation started quietly but escalated into shouts. Then, an eerie silence fell. Donna and Samuel, accustomed to the brothers' occasional loud disputes, didn't intervene, unaware of the gravity of the situation. The next morning, Donna realized Sean was missing. He hadn't returned her calls, which was unlike him. She questioned Stanley, who explained that Sean had left after their argument. 2 days of searching yielded no results, and the family's anxiety grew. Then a frantic call came from Jennifer, Sean's sister. The police dispatcher heard her screams, punctuated by a piercing male moan in the background. After calming her, the dispatcher recorded her plea. "Damn it, my brother Stanley killed Sean. He's in the house, talking to his mother. His father is freaking lying over his dead son, who's been buried in the ground since early Saturday morning. Damn it, I'm begging for help." Police arrived to a nightmarish scene in the Eckeds' backyard. Samuel knelt on the ground, hands caked with dirt, screaming as he pulled Sean's body from a shallow grave, trying to wipe the soil from his son's face. The quiet neighborhood, once filled with the brothers' friendly waves to neighbors, had become the stage for a violent tragedy. Stanley Eckerd was detained on suspicion of premeditated murder. During his first interrogation, Stanley revealed he hadn't intended to kill Sean. In a moment of rage, he struck his brother on the head. Realizing Sean was dead, Stanley panicked, tied up the body, and carried it out through the bedroom window to bury it in the backyard. His chilling words at the inquest were, "I buried him." After all, that's what you do with dead people. The statement sounded like the cold calculation of a killer, not a loving brother. Stanley claimed he acted to protect his mother, fearing the shock of Sean's death would harm her fragile heart. He planned to move the body later, once his parents were away. His behavior during the interrogation was erratic. At times, he wept, confessing remorsefully. At others, he spoke harshly of Sean, blaming him for all his troubles and accusing him of stealing their mother's and Samantha's affection. He admitted to a rivalry, believing he had finally won. That same day, Stanley was charged with second-degree murder and held without bail. 2 days later, Dr. Barbara Wolfe performed an autopsy on Sean's body. The forensic report revealed bruising under the skin and rope marks on his neck, indicating compression that made breathing difficult. The cause of death was a head injury combined with asphyxiation. Assistant State Attorney Pete Marino led the prosecution, with the case first heard on February 25, 2011, presided over by District Judge Stephen Rushing. On April 9, 2013, the trial began in Hernando County Court, overseen by District Judge Anthony Toddy. The defense, led by attorney Alan Lanter, faced prosecutor Marino. The prosecution aimed to prove Stanley had planned the crime, while the defense argued it was a spontaneous fight with a tragic outcome. In closing, Lanter urged the jury to consider Stanley's attempt to hide the crime as a misguided act to spare his family pain. Stanley was charged with first-degree premeditated murder, which carried a mandatory life sentence. Second-degree murder, however, was punishable by up to life in prison. Stanley maintained he never intended to kill his brother. Before the trial, Stanley rejected a plea deal for second-degree murder that would have capped his sentence at 20 years. He remained stoic as the verdict was read. After deliberating for about 2.5 hours, the jury of 9 women and 3 men found him guilty of second-degree murder. Donna and Samuel wept quietly, their sobs turning to screams as the jury left the courtroom. Relatives gathered around them, offering comfort. The Eckards believed Stanley's account and criticized the state attorney's office for pursuing the charges. Samuel praised Lanter's defense but questioned the verdict, saying, "I really can't understand how the jury reached a verdict of second-degree murder in about 2 hours." Despite their shaken faith, they filed an appeal, which was denied. In closing arguments, Marino displayed photos of Sean's dirt-covered body, curled in a fetal position in the shallow grave. "This is not a detective novel case," he said, noting Stanley's 6 conflicting statements to detectives. Initially, Stanley claimed ignorance of Sean's fate. For 2 days after Sean's funeral, he sent messages from Sean's phone to family, claiming Sean had gone to California to be with Mary Jane. He also messaged Samantha, posing as Sean, urging her to focus on Stanley. After hours of questioning, Stanley admitted Sean died during a struggle in the bedroom. He claimed he heard a snap in Sean's neck as they fell, and he hid the body to protect Donna's weak heart, planning to tell Samuel later. Marino highlighted testimony about rising tensions over Samantha and a conversation Stanley had with a friend weeks earlier, where he described killing someone by striking their head and burying the body in the yard. Marino argued, those injuries the defendant inflicted with his hands constitute murder. Lanter countered that a crime requires intent. Yes, he was involved in his brother's death, but he didn't kill his brother, he said. He pointed to a forensic pathologist's testimony that the head injury, combined with Sean's high blood alcohol content and possible lingering brain swelling from encephalitis, caused his death. The pathologist noted that hitting his head on a nightstand during the fall could have been fatal. Lanter also cited Donna's testimony, who called Sean's death an accident, and noted Sean's mood swings post-illness. Lanter urged the jury not to be swayed by the gruesome photos of Sean's body or Stanley's poor decision to bury him. Stanley Eckert did something horrible after Sean died, he said, but he's not a murderer. At the final sentencing, Judge Toddy imposed a 50-year prison sentence without parole. The Eckards were devastated. One day had robbed them of both sons, Sean to a brutal murder and Stanley to a life behind bars. The biblical story of Cain and Abel, where a brother's jealousy led to murder, found a modern echo in the Eckid's tragedy. Cain was banished from paradise, but Stanley's solution was to eliminate the source of his remorse, leaving a family broken and a community in shock. The case of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom stands as one of the most notorious and brutal in United States history, shaking the nation twice. First in 2007 when the crimes occurred, and again in 2011 when the sentences of the perpetrators were challenged and appealed. This complex legal battle led to the enactment of two significant laws, one protecting victims from defamation by prohibiting attempts to portray them negatively in court, and another abolishing the requirement for a judge's approval of a jury's unanimous verdict. In this harrowing tale, two innocent victims fell prey to five merciless criminals, with a motive for the heinous act being a simple robbery. Let's delve into the details of this tragedy, reconstruct the chronology of those horrific events, understand the role of each participant, and explore whether this catastrophe could have been prevented, potentially saving two young lives. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., commonly known as Chris, was born on September 21, 1983, in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Mary and Hugh Newsom. As the youngest child in a loving, large family, Chris was cherished by all. In his youth, he was athletic, excelling particularly in baseball during his school years. His coach believed he had a promising future in the sport, but a severe injury and a lengthy recovery ended his athletic aspirations. Nevertheless, Chris was a man of many talents. He was an accomplished artist, played the guitar, had woodworking skills, and was passionate about cars and motorcycles, dreaming of becoming a mechanic. In his youth, his love for carpentry took precedence. After high school, he enrolled at the prestigious University of Tennessee, where he was a diligent student, consistently ranking among the top of his class. Shannon Gale Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas, the younger of two children to Dina and Gary Christian. Raised alongside her older brother Chase, with whom she shared a close and affectionate bond, Shannon's birth was considered a miracle, as Dina had been diagnosed with infertility in her youth. In 1997, the Christian family relocated to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools and their parents established a small but profitable family business. Dina conducted individual psychotherapy sessions from home, and Shannon, sharing her mother's interest in psychology, was outgoing and kind-hearted. After high school, she pursued a sociology degree at the University of Tennessee, working part-time to save for her dream of owning a car. On her 21st birthday, with help from her parents and brother, she purchased a silver Toyota 4Runner. It was on the University of Tennessee campus in 2006 that Chris and Shannon met through mutual friends. She was 21, and he was nearing 23. Their connection was instantaneous, love at first sight, and they became inseparable. Within a month, Chris introduced Shannon to his parents, expressing his desire to build a future with her. Shannon reciprocated, introducing Chris to her family, who warmly welcomed him. In October 2006, a significant family dinner brought together both sets of parents and siblings. The conversation revolved around the couple's deep feelings and their plans to marry after graduating. Everyone was filled with joy and hope, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that would soon befall their families. On January 6, 2007, Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom were invited to a friend's birthday party in Knoxville. That Saturday, Shannon visited a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration, parking her Toyota 4Runner in a nearby underground garage where she planned to meet Chris. However, Chris was delayed, leading to a minor argument as they were running late. Their friends grew increasingly worried when the couple failed to arrive at the party. Known for their responsibility, it was unlike Shannon and Chris to miss an event without notifying anyone. Repeated attempts to reach them by phone were unsuccessful. In desperation, Shannon's best friend called Dina, Shannon's mother, late into the night to check if everything was all right, but received no answer. The next morning, Dina realized Shannon hadn't come home. Initially, she wasn't overly concerned, assuming Shannon might have stayed at Chris's place after the party. Shannon had a work shift on Sunday, so it seemed plausible she had gone straight to work. However, Dina's concern deepened when she noticed several missed calls from an unknown number around midnight. Returning the call, she heard Shannon's friend's voice, who informed her that Shannon and Chris hadn't shown up at the party and were unreachable. Fear gripped Dina, sensing something terrible had happened. Neither Shannon nor Chris answered their phones, and Chris's parents were equally surprised, believing he was with Shannon. Anxiety mounted when it was confirmed that Shannon hadn't appeared for her work shift. The worried parents immediately contacted the police, but the response was lackluster. Officers suggested the couple might have sought some alone time and lost track of it, citing protocol that an adult is considered missing only after 24 hours without contact. For Shannon and Chris, those 24 hours proved critical. Unwilling to wait, the couple's parents and friends launched their own search. They contacted everyone they knew, visited hospitals, distributed flyers with their photos, and created social media groups appealing for information. Despite their efforts, no leads surfaced. The last known sighting of Shannon was at the beauty salon, where she had spoken only about the upcoming party, with no plans to stop elsewhere, according to her hairstylist. It wasn't until Monday, January 8, 2007, that the police officially began searching for Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom. By then, thanks to the efforts of their loved ones, nearly all of Knoxville was aware of their disappearance. The previous day, Sunday, rumors had circulated about a horrifying discovery near the railroad tracks, but no concrete details were available. A railroad worker, inspecting his assigned area, had stumbled upon what appeared to be severely damaged human remains on the embankment alongside the tracks. The body was in a horrific state, bearing multiple injuries and doused with a flammable liquid in an attempt to burn it. Police cordoned off the scene and conducted a thorough examination but found no significant clues. After photographing the remains, they were sent to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death and attempt identification, though the extensive damage and fire made this challenging. Forensic experts determined the body belonged to a young man who had suffered a brutal death. He had sustained multiple injuries while alive, indicating prolonged and severe assault. Nearly all his teeth were knocked out or damaged by blows, and he had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and a final, fatal shot to the head. Disturbingly, traces of seminal fluid from at least 3 different men were found in his body, along with distinctive tears suggesting repeated, violent assaults. Checking recent missing person reports, police identified Chris Newsom as a potential match based on age, height, and build. They contacted his parents, requesting DNA samples for confirmation but strongly advising against personal identification at the morgue, as the burnt remains were barely recognizable. DNA analysis confirmed the body was Chris's, delivering devastating news to his family. Despite this, Shannon's parents clung to hope that their daughter was alive, perhaps being held somewhere. Her mobile phone had last pinged on the day of their disappearance in one of Knoxville's more troubled neighborhoods, a place the couple would not have visited willingly. This suggested they had been taken there against their will, and Shannon might still be in the area. In a secluded alley of this neighborhood, Shannon's Toyota 4Runner was found abandoned. It was in a deplorable state, barely recognizable to Dina and Gary Christian. The SUV was dirty, scratched, with broken headlights and deflated tires. All of Shannon's personal belongings were missing, and the interior was littered with cigarette butts, with torn and stained seats. The driver's seat was pushed far back, indicating a large adult male had driven it last. A crumpled envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found on the floor between the seats, likely dropped by the perpetrator. A local witness reported seeing 4 African-American males driving the SUV that Saturday evening, a vehicle that stood out in the area. Fingerprints on the envelope led police to Lamarcus Davidson, a man with prior convictions for serious offenses. His residence, located in an industrial area near a wasteland, lacked witnesses. When no one responded to police knocks or offered to surrender, they forced entry, hoping to find Shannon alive. Inside, they discovered Shannon's purse, a stuffed toy from her car, Chris's headphones, and his baseball cap. A knife with blood traces, torn and blood-stained fragments of women's clothing, and most horrifically, Shannon's lifeless body were found in the house's trash chute system, hidden under dirty sheets. She was bound in the fetal position and wrapped in 5 trash bags. Experts later concluded she had died in the early hours of Monday, January 8th. This tragic discovery suggested that if police had acted immediately after the missing person report, rather than waiting 24 hours, Shannon might have been saved. The condition of Shannon's body was a horrifying sight, even for seasoned forensic experts. Not a single area of her body was untouched. She was covered from head to toe with bruises, abrasions, cuts, and cigarette burns. Numerous tears and injuries to her genital area, oral cavity, and throat indicated she had been subjected to multiple assaults by several men. Shannon had sustained a serious head injury and internal bleeding in the abdominal area, likely from being kicked. The perpetrators had inflicted several penetrating, though non-fatal, stab wounds and extinguished dozens of cigarettes on her skin. In a brutal attempt to destroy DNA evidence, they doused her with household bleach, focusing on bleeding wounds and her genital area. She was also forced to ingest bleach. After these torturous acts, Shannon, still alive, was wrapped in 5 trash bags and shoved into the trash chute, covered with sheets and rags. She slowly suffocated and bled to death, helplessly trapped with no chance to escape or call for help. Lamarcus Davidson, in whose house Shannon's body and Chris's belongings were found, was immediately declared a fugitive. Police also tracked down another suspect, Eric Boyd, whose traces were found at the crime scene. Boyd was apprehended on January 11th without resistance and agreed to cooperate, insisting he wouldn't go to prison for crimes he didn't commit. He revealed that Davidson was hiding in a vacant house listed for sale and personally led police to the location. Caught off guard, Davidson offered no resistance. Notably, at the time of his arrest, he was wearing sneakers that had belonged to Chris. During interrogations, Davidson tried to minimize his role, portraying himself as a victim. He claimed the couple had come to his house to buy banned substances, but were caught in a conflict with his acquaintances. He insisted he left to avoid involvement, and the subsequent brutal acts occurred in his absence. Further interrogations revealed 3 more individuals involved: Davidson's friend George Thomas, his half-brother Latalvis Cobbins, and an 18-year-old woman named Vanessa Lynn Coleman. Once all 5 suspects were in custody, they were placed in separate cells and interrogated individually. Each attempted to shift blame onto the others, inadvertently revealing details of the heinous crime. Their fragmented accounts helped police piece together the event's chronology and each perpetrator's role. Lamarcus Davidson, released from prison on parole just months before, was desperate for money. Involved in the sale of banned substances, he urgently needed a vehicle to make deliveries. He decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot known for its lack of surveillance cameras, accompanied by his accomplices. Tragically, Shannon and Chris were in the parking lot, arguing over Chris's delay. The criminals, deciding to leave no witnesses, forced the couple into the trunk of a car at gunpoint. They were taken to Davidson's house at 2316 Chipman Street, where they were brutally beaten and repeatedly assaulted. After midnight, Chris, barefoot and undressed, was forced back into the trunk and driven to the railroad tracks. Ordered to walk on the stones, he was shot twice in the back, with a final shot to the head ending his torment. His body was doused with a flammable liquid and set on fire to destroy evidence. The criminals returned to the house, where Shannon remained bound. She endured horrific cruelty the next day, leaving no part of her body uninjured. The assailants concluded their torture by dousing her with bleach and packing her, still alive, into plastic trash bags, where she slowly suffocated. The exact moment Vanessa Coleman joined the group was unclear. She claimed to be a hostage, participating out of fear for her life. However, Boyd indicated she was Davidson's girlfriend and willingly took part, even stealing some of Shannon's jewelry and her mobile phone. A personal diary found at Vanessa's home described the horrors at Davidson's house as an exciting adventure. The investigation established that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, was the leader and primary instigator of the brutal acts. He tried to deflect blame, claiming the couple sought drugs and later suggested engaging in rough intimacy with him and his friends, a situation he said spiraled out of control. Remarkably, the defendant's lawyers adopted this narrative, attempting to tarnish the victims' reputations in court. The victims' parents later expressed immense anguish over these false claims. Davidson was found guilty on 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and particularly cruel and premeditated termination of life. The jury unanimously decided he deserved the death penalty. Latalvis Cobbins, born in 1982, faced the death penalty for his role in the torture, assaults, and killings, but was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. George Thomas, born in 1983, received a similar life sentence with no chance of release. Eric Boyd, due to his cooperation in capturing Davidson, was sentenced to 18 years, a penalty the victims' families found outrageously lenient. Vanessa Coleman, born in 1988, the only female participant, was proven to have taken part in the torture, assaults, and Shannon's death. She was sentenced to 53 years in prison. In 2011, while the criminals served their sentences and Davidson awaited execution, the case took an unexpected turn. The presiding judge resigned, admitting to a substance dependency, casting doubt on his ability to conduct trials. His verdicts over the previous 2 years were annulled, necessitating new hearings, including for this case. A new judge scheduled retrials for all 5 individuals. Davidson's death penalty remained unchanged. Cobbins continued serving life without parole. Thomas received a life sentence with a possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman's sentence was reduced from 53 to 35 years. Her 2014 appeal was rejected, and parole was denied in 2017, with her next eligibility in April 2032. Eric Boyd's case saw the most dramatic change. Originally receiving a lighter sentence for cooperating, his involvement in the assaults and killings was later proven. His retrial resulted in a life sentence without parole, with Thomas testifying against him, revealing new details about Boyd's role. For his testimony, Thomas's sentence was reduced by 15%, contingent on good behavior. Boyd's appeals were unsuccessful, and he remains at Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Davidson is in the maximum security Riverbend institution, awaiting execution. The trial garnered significant attention, widely covered by the press, leading to the enactment of 2 laws. The first protected victims from defamation, countering defense strategies that falsely portrayed Shannon and Chris as drug users or thrill seekers in a troubled neighborhood, claims that caused immense pain to their families. The second eliminated the need for a judge's signature on a jury's unanimous verdict, which could have prevented the retrials. The house at 2316 Chipman Street, a torture chamber for the couple, was demolished in fall 2008. A memorial was erected in their honor. In memory of Shannon, a golf tournament and the Christian Charity Foundation were established, supporting victims of violence. For Chris, a foundation in his name holds annual memorial baseball tournaments at Halls Park and awards a scholarship named after the former baseball player. Despite the public outcry, initial media coverage misrepresented details, possibly due to racial motives, as the victims were white and the perpetrators African American. However, the head of the Association of Criminal Writers and Editors noted, "I can't confidently say this case would have received more attention if 5 white criminals had been accused of similar atrocities against 2 black individuals." The Knoxville police chief stated there was no evidence of racial animosity as motive. The tragedy of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom remains a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of senseless violence, leaving their families and community forever scarred. The murder of Kelly Clayton in September 2015 sent shockwaves through the small, tight-knit community of Catlin, a rural town in Chemung County, North Carolina. Known for its peaceful, idyllic setting, Catlin was a place where violent crime was virtually unheard of, making the brutality of Kelly's death all the more jarring. The case unfolded as a chilling tale of betrayal, greed, and a meticulously planned conspiracy orchestrated by someone closest to the victim, her own husband, Tom Clayton. This is the story of Kelly's life, the sinister plot that ended it, and the investigation that brought her killers to justice. Kelly Ann Turner was born on April 20, 1980, in Elmira, North Carolina, to parents Linda and Robert Turner. Growing up in a warm, supportive household alongside her older sister, Lisa, Kelly was a bright and spirited child. She excelled academically, particularly in mathematics, and was a talented athlete, competing in track and field during her high school years at Elmira Free Academy. Known for her infectious smile and boundless energy, Kelly was a beloved figure among her peers, always ready to lend a hand or share a laugh. After graduating high school in 1998, Kelly pursued a degree in business administration at Corning Community College, where she continued to shine. It was during her college years that she met Thomas "Tom" Clayton, a charismatic young man with a knack for charming those around him. Tom, born in 1978, had grown up in a nearby town and was working as a mechanic while pursuing his own ambitions. The two quickly fell in love, bonding over their shared dreams of building a stable, happy life together. Their relationship blossomed, and in 2002, they married in a joyful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. The couple settled in Catlin, where they purchased a modest but cozy home on Jinnan Road. Kelly took a job as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company, while Tom found work as a service manager at a car dealership. In 2005, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Charlotte, followed by a second daughter, Chloe, in 2008. Kelly embraced motherhood with unwavering devotion, balancing her career with raising her girls, attending their school events, and creating a nurturing home environment. To friends and neighbors, the Claytons appeared to be the epitome of a perfect family, hardworking, close-knit, and deeply committed to one another. Beneath the surface, however, the Claytons' marriage was far from idyllic. Tom, despite his outward charm, had a darker side that Kelly began to notice as the years passed. He was prone to selfishness and had a wandering eye, often flirting with other women, which caused tension in their relationship. Kelly, fiercely loyal and determined to keep her family intact, confronted Tom about his behavior, but he dismissed her concerns, insisting she was overreacting. Financially, the couple struggled at times as Tom's spending habits, particularly on hobbies like car racing and socializing at local bars, strained their budget. Kelly, ever the responsible one, took on extra hours at work to ensure their bills were paid and their daughter's needs were met. By 2014, Kelly's patience was wearing thin. She confided in her sister Lisa that she was growing tired of Tom's irresponsibility and lack of commitment to their family. She hinted at considering separation but was hesitant, fearing the impact on Charlotte and Chloe. Unbeknownst to Kelly, Tom had begun an affair with a coworker, a young woman named Sarah, who worked at the car dealership. The affair was a closely guarded secret, but it fueled Tom's growing detachment from his wife. He started staying out late, claiming he was working overtime, while Kelly juggled her job and parenting duties alone. In early 2015, Tom's financial troubles worsened. He had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Kelly, worth $1 million, ostensibly to secure their family's future. However, his true intentions were far more sinister. Struggling with mounting debts and enticed by the prospect of a large payout, Tom began to entertain a chilling idea: eliminating Kelly to claim the insurance money and start anew with Sarah. He needed an accomplice to carry out the plan, someone desperate enough to be swayed by the promise of a share of the payout. That's when he turned to Michael Beard. Michael Beard was a 35-year-old drifter with a troubled past. Born in Elmira, he had a history of petty crimes, including theft and drug possession, and had struggled to hold down steady employment. In 2015, Beard was working sporadically as a laborer at the same car dealership where Tom was a manager. The two men had struck up a casual acquaintance, often chatting during breaks. Beard, down on his luck and living in a rundown apartment, was easily impressionable, and Tom saw him as the perfect pawn. In the summer of 2015, Tom approached Beard with a proposition. Over drinks at a local bar, he confided that he wanted Kelly out of the picture and was willing to pay handsomely for someone to take care of it. At first, Beard thought Tom was joking, but Tom's persistence and the mention of a $10,000 payment, plus a cut of the insurance money, piqued his interest. Tom assured Beard that the plan was foolproof. Beard would break into the Clayton home, stage a robbery, and kill Kelly, making it look like a random act of violence. Tom would ensure he had an alibi, claiming he was at work or out of town. Beard, desperate for money and lured by the promise of a windfall, agreed. Over the next few weeks, Tom and Beard met secretly to refine the plan. Tom provided Beard with detailed information about the layout of the house, Kelly's schedule, and the best time to strike. Late at night when the children were asleep, he instructed Beard to use a tire iron as the weapon, as it was untraceable and could be discarded easily. Tom also gave Beard a spare key to the house to avoid any signs of forced entry. To solidify Beard's commitment, Tom paid him an advance of $500, which Beard used to buy drugs and alcohol. The stage was set for a horrific betrayal. On the night of September 28, 2015, Kelly put Charlotte and Chloe to bed as usual, reading them a bedtime story and tucking them in with kisses. Tom had told her he was working late at the dealership, a common excuse she no longer questioned. Around 11 p.m., Kelly settled into the living room to watch TV, unaware that Michael Beard was approaching the house. Armed with a tire iron and wearing dark clothing, Beard used the spare key to enter quietly through the back door. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the television. As Kelly sat on the couch, Beard crept up behind her. Without warning, he raised the tire iron and struck her on the head with brutal force. Kelly let out a scream, but the blow dazed her, and she collapsed to the floor. Panicked but determined to follow through, Beard struck her repeatedly, targeting her head and upper body. Blood splattered across the living room, staining the carpet and furniture. Kelly, fighting for her life, tried to crawl away, but her injuries were too severe. Within minutes, she succumbed to the relentless attack, her body lying motionless in a pool of blood. Beard, shaken by the violence but adhering to Tom's instructions, staged the scene to look like a robbery. He ransacked the living room, overturning furniture and emptying drawers. He took Kelly's purse, jewelry, and a few electronics to make the theft appear convincing. Before fleeing, he wiped down the tire iron and hid it in a nearby dumpster. He then slipped out of the house, leaving the back door ajar to suggest an intruder had fled. At 2:30 a.m. on September 29th, Tom Clayton returned home from his supposed late shift. He entered the house, saw Kelly's body, and immediately called 911, his voice trembling with feigned panic. "Oh my God, someone's broken in. My wife, she's hurt bad. There's blood everywhere. Please hurry," he cried to the dispatcher. When police and paramedics arrived, they found Tom kneeling beside Kelly's body, sobbing uncontrollably. Charlotte and Chloe, awakened by the commotion, were huddled in their room, terrified and confused. First responders confirmed Kelly was deceased, her body bearing the marks of a savage beating. The scene was chaotic, with bloodstains and overturned furniture suggesting a struggle. Tom told officers he had been at work all night and had no idea what happened. He claimed he'd last spoken to Kelly around 9 p.m. when she said she was going to bed. He described their marriage as happy and insisted they had no enemies. The officers, noting his emotional display, initially took his story at face value, but began to suspect something was amiss. Tom's tears seemed rehearsed, and his account of his whereabouts was vague. The children were taken to stay with Kelly's parents, who were devastated by the news. Linda and Robert Turner rushed to the scene, collapsing in grief at the sight of their daughter's lifeless body. Lisa, Kelly's sister, was inconsolable, demanding answers about who could have done such a thing. The community of Catlin rallied around the family, organizing vigils and offering support, but the question lingered, who could commit such a heinous act in their quiet town? The Chemung County Sheriff's Office, led by Detective Mark Johnston, launched a thorough investigation. The crime scene yielded several clues: no signs of forced entry, the selective nature of the robbery, and the ferocity of the attack suggested the perpetrator knew Kelly. Forensic experts collected blood samples, fingerprints, and DNA evidence, while officers canvassed the neighborhood for witnesses. A neighbor reported seeing a man in dark clothing near the Clayton home around 11 p.m., but the description was too vague to be immediately useful. Detective Johnston interviewed Tom multiple times, noting inconsistencies in his story. Tom claimed he was at the dealership until 2 a.m., but coworkers reported he left around 10 p.m. to run errands. His phone records showed several calls to an unknown number in the hours leading up to the murder, which piqued Johnston's interest. Meanwhile, forensic analysis revealed that the tire iron, recovered from a dumpster a mile away, had traces of Kelly's blood and hair, but no fingerprints, suggesting the killer had worn gloves. The breakthrough came when investigators traced the unknown number to Michael Beard. Beard had a criminal record, and his connection to Tom raised red flags. When brought in for questioning on October 2nd, Beard initially denied involvement, claiming he was home alone that night. However, under pressure, he cracked, confessing to the murder and implicating Tom as the mastermind. "Tom paid me to do it," Beard admitted, his voice shaking. He wanted her gone for the insurance money. Said it'd be quick and easy, and I'd get 10 grand. Beard detailed the planning, the spare key, and Tom's instructions to stage a robbery. He expressed remorse, saying, "I didn't mean for it to be so bad. I just kept hitting her, 'cause she wouldn't stop moving." His confession was corroborated by phone records showing multiple calls between him and Tom in the days before the murder, as well as a $500 cash withdrawal from Tom's bank account that matched the advance Beard received. Armed with Beard's testimony, police arrested Tom Clayton on October 5th, charging him with first-degree murder and conspiracy. When confronted with the evidence, Tom maintained his innocence, insisting Beard was lying to save himself. "I loved Kelly. Why would I do this to my own wife?" he shouted during interrogation. But the evidence was overwhelming, and his facade began to crumble. The trial of Tom Clayton and Michael Beard began in March 2017 in Chemung County Court, presided over by Judge David Brockway. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Whedon Wetmore, presented a compelling case, detailing the conspiracy and the brutal execution of Kelly's murder. Beard, who had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a reduced sentence, testified against Tom, recounting their meetings and Tom's promise of a $10,000 payout. Phone records, bank transactions, and the tire iron evidence further solidified the case. The defense, representing Tom, argued that Beard acted alone, driven by financial desperation, and that Tom was unaware of his plans. They portrayed Tom as a grieving husband and devoted father, claiming the prosecution's case relied on the unreliable testimony of a convicted criminal. However, the jury was unconvinced by Tom's tearful denials, especially after Sarah, his mistress, testified about their affair and Tom's complaints about his marriage. She revealed that Tom had spoken of wanting to start over and had mentioned the life insurance policy months before Kelly's death. The most heart-wrenching moment came when Lisa Turner took the stand, delivering a victim impact statement. "Kelly was my best friend, my sister, the heart of our family," she said through tears. "Tom, you took her from us for money. You let your greed destroy her and break your daughter's hearts. How could you look her in the eyes every day, knowing what you were planning?" The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy. After a 3-week trial, the jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Tom Clayton guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy on April 10, 2017. Michael Beard, having cooperated, was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. On May 15, 2017, Tom was sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, he showed no emotion, staring blankly ahead while Kelly's family wept with relief. Linda Turner clutched a photo of Kelly, whispering, "We got justice, sweetheart." The aftermath of Kelly's murder left Catlin forever changed. The town, once a haven of tranquility, grappled with the reality that such evil could lurk within its borders. Charlotte and Chloe, now 10 and 7, were raised by Linda and Robert Turner, who fought to provide them with love and stability despite their grief. The girls attended counseling to cope with the loss of their mother and the betrayal of their father, who was erased from their lives. Kelly's memory lived on through a scholarship fund established in her name at Elmira Free Academy, supporting students pursuing business or athletics. The community held annual vigils on Jinnan Road, where neighbors planted a garden in Kelly's honor, filled with her favorite flowers, sunflowers and daisies. Lisa became an advocate for victims of domestic violence, speaking out about the warning signs she wished she'd recognized in Tom's behavior. Tom Clayton, now 47, remains at Sing Sing Correctional Facility, where he has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. In prison, he maintains his innocence, but his fellow inmates and guards regard him with disdain, knowing the depths of his betrayal. Michael Beard, serving his sentence at Auburn Correctional Facility, has expressed remorse but faces a lifetime of regret for his role in the tragedy. Kelly Clayton's story is a heartbreaking reminder of how greed and betrayal can destroy lives. Her vibrant spirit, her love for her daughters, and her dedication to her family were extinguished by the very person she trusted most. Yet her legacy endures in the strength of her loved ones, who honor her memory by living with the kindness and resilience she embodied. The biblical tale of Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, find a modern parallel in Tom Clayton, whose greed led him to sacrifice his wife for a fleeting promise of wealth. In Catlin, Kelly's name is spoken with love, a beacon of light in a community forever marked by her loss. The murder of Lauren Burke in 2008 was a devastating blow to Auburn, Alabama, a vibrant college town unaccustomed to such violent crimes. Lauren, a promising freshman at Auburn University, was known for her warmth, intelligence, and bright future. Her life was tragically cut short by Courtney Lara Lockhart, a troubled man whose actions shattered a family and left a community grappling with grief. This is the story of Lauren's life, the horrific events that led to her death, and the relentless pursuit of justice that followed. Lauren Nicole Burke was born on August 15, 1989, in Athens, Georgia, to parents Susan and Michael Burke. The youngest of 3 children, Lauren grew up in a loving, close-knit family alongside her older brother, Daniel, and sister, Emily. From an early age, Lauren was a beacon of light, curious, compassionate, and fiercely determined. She excelled in school, particularly in English and history, and had a passion for creative writing, often penning short stories and poems that captivated her teachers. Her outgoing personality made her a natural leader, and she was actively involved in her high school's debate team and volunteer programs, always eager to help others. After graduating from Athens High School in 2007 with honors, Lauren enrolled at Auburn University, drawn to its strong academic programs and vibrant campus life. She chose to major in political science with dreams of attending law school and becoming an advocate for social justice. At 18, she moved into an apartment at the College Park complex in Auburn, excited to embrace her newfound independence. Lauren quickly made friends, joining a sorority and participating in campus events. Her infectious laugh and genuine kindness endeared her to everyone she met, from classmates to professors. Lauren's family remained her anchor. She called her parents weekly, sharing stories of her classes and new friends, and often visited home for holidays. Susan described her as the glue that held us together, always planning family gatherings and checking in on her siblings. Despite the demands of college life, Lauren stayed true to her values, balancing her studies with volunteer work at a local animal shelter, where she found joy in caring for abandoned pets. On the evening of March 4, 2008, Lauren was at her apartment, preparing for a busy week of midterms. She had spent the day studying at the library and returned home around 6 p.m. to relax. Her roommate, Sarah, was out for the evening, leaving Lauren alone. Around 7 p.m., she decided to make a quick trip to a nearby convenience store to grab snacks, a routine errand she'd done countless times. She grabbed her keys, slipped on her jacket, and left her apartment, unaware that this decision would lead to a tragic encounter. Courtney Laro Lockhart, a 24-year-old unemployed drifter, was loitering near the College Park complex that night. Born in 1984 in Montgomery, Alabama, Lockhart had a troubled past marked by instability and crime. Raised by a single mother, he struggled academically and dropped out of high school, falling into a pattern of petty theft and drug use. By 2008, he was living a transient lifestyle, moving between towns and taking odd jobs to survive. Lockhart had a history of violence, including a 2006 arrest for assault, though he avoided significant jail time. Desperate for money and battling addiction, he had turned to carjacking and robbery to fund his habits. That evening, Lockhart spotted Lauren as she walked to her car, a silver 2001 Honda Civic. Seeing an opportunity, he approached her, intending to steal the vehicle. Lauren, caught off guard, tried to reason with him, saying, "Please, just take the car. I won't tell anyone." But Lockhart, fueled by desperation and paranoia, forced her into the passenger seat at gunpoint, a stolen .38 caliber revolver in his hand. He drove off, heading north toward Interstate 85, with no clear plan but a growing sense of panic. As Lockhart drove, Lauren remained calm, trying to de-escalate the situation. She spoke softly, telling him about her family and her studies, hoping to appeal to his humanity. "My parents will be worried," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You don't have to do this. Just let me go, and I'll forget this happened." Lockhart, however, was unraveling. His erratic behavior suggested he was under the influence, and his agitation grew as Lauren's words challenged his resolve. He cursed under his breath, muttering, "Damn it, shut up. I need to think." After driving aimlessly for over an hour, Lockhart pulled off the highway onto a secluded dirt road near Lee County Road 112, a remote area surrounded by dense woods. It was now past 9 p.m., and the darkness offered cover for his actions. He ordered Lauren out of the car, his gun still trained on her. Terrified but defiant, Lauren pleaded, "You can take the car, the money, everything. Just let me live." Lockhart, consumed by fear of being caught, made a fateful decision. He fired a single shot, striking Lauren in the chest. She collapsed to the ground, gasping in pain. In a fleeting moment of clarity, Lockhart hesitated, realizing the gravity of what he'd done. But instead of seeking help, he dragged Lauren's body deeper into the woods, concealing it under brush and leaves. He returned to the car, wiped down the interior to remove fingerprints, and abandoned it in a parking lot in Opelika, about 10 miles away. Lockhart then fled on foot, hitchhiking back to Montgomery, where he laid low, believing he had escaped detection. When Lauren didn't return home that night, Sarah, her roommate, grew concerned. Lauren was meticulous about her schedule and always let Sarah know her plans. By midnight, Sarah called Lauren's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She contacted Lauren's parents, who were immediately alarmed. Susan and Michael drove to Auburn from Athens, arriving at the apartment around 3 a.m. on March 5th. Finding no sign of Lauren, they reported her missing to the Auburn Police Department. The police response was swift. Given Lauren's reputation as a responsible student, officers searched her apartment, finding her purse, laptop, and textbooks untouched, ruling out the possibility that she had left voluntarily. Her phone records showed no activity after 7:15 p.m. the previous evening, and her last known location was near the convenience store. A BOLO Be on the Lookout alert was issued for her Honda Civic, and volunteers from the university and community joined the search, distributing flyers with Lauren's photo, a smiling young woman with bright blue eyes and auburn hair. On March 6th, a tip from a local resident led police to Lauren's car in Opelika. The vehicle was processed for evidence, revealing traces of blood in the passenger seat and a single bullet casing on the floorboard. Fingerprints found on the steering wheel and door handle didn't match Lauren's, prompting a wider investigation. The discovery heightened fears that Lauren had been abducted, and her family clung to hope that she was still alive. Susan, her voice breaking, told reporters, "Lauren is out there somewhere, and we won't stop until we bring her home." On March 10, 2008, a hunter searching for game in the woods off Lee County Road 112 stumbled upon a disturbing sight: partially covered body hidden beneath leaves and branches. He immediately contacted authorities, who confirmed the remains were those of a young woman. Dental records and a necklace inscribed with the letter L, a gift from her mother, identified the body as Lauren Burke. The autopsy revealed she had died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, with additional bruises on her arms indicating a struggle. The time of death was estimated to be late on March 4th, consistent with her disappearance. The Burke family was devastated. Susan collapsed upon hearing the news, while Michael held her, tears streaming down his face. Daniel and Emily, who had joined the search efforts, were inconsolable, grappling with the loss of their vibrant sister. The Auburn community mourned alongside them, holding candlelight vigils on campus where students shared memories of Lauren's kindness and spirit. Her sorority sisters created a memorial display with her favorite flowers, lilies, and her professors spoke of her intellectual promise, noting her as a student who inspired others. The investigation, led by Detective Captain Tom Young of the Auburn Police Department, focused on identifying the owner of the fingerprints found in Lauren's car. A breakthrough came on March 12th when the prints were matched to Courtney Lockhart, whose criminal record included prior arrests in Montgomery. Lockhart was already a person of interest in a separate carjacking case, and his description matched a vague witness account of a man seen near the College Park complex on March 4th. Police tracked Lockhart to a Montgomery apartment where he was staying with a cousin. On March 14th, he was arrested without incident, though he initially denied any involvement in Lauren's death. During interrogation, Lockhart's story unraveled. He claimed he had borrowed the car after finding it abandoned, but forensic evidence, blood traces on his clothing, and a partial match to the revolver found in his possession tied him to the crime. Under pressure, he confessed, admitting to abducting Lauren and shooting her in a panic. "I didn't mean to kill her," he said, his voice hollow. "Things just got out of hand. I was scared," she'd tell the cops. Lockhart's confession was chillingly detached, showing little remorse. He described dragging Lauren's body into the woods, saying, "I had to hide her, Didn't want anyone finding out." The revolver, stolen from a previous robbery, was confirmed as the murder weapon, and ballistic tests matched the bullet recovered from Lauren's body. Additional evidence, including Lauren's wallet found in Lockhart's apartment, sealed his fate. Courtney Lockhart's trial began in January 2010 in Lee County Circuit Court, presided over by Judge Jacob Walker. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Robert Trees, presented a meticulous case, detailing Lockhart's abduction of Lauren, the deliberate nature of the murder, and his attempts to cover his tracks. Forensic evidence, including DNA, fingerprints, and ballistic reports, left no doubt of his guilt. Lauren's blood-stained jacket, recovered from the crime scene, was displayed in court, eliciting gasps from the jury. The defense, represented by attorney Margaret Brown, argued that Lockhart's actions were not premeditated, citing his drug use and unstable mental state. They claimed he acted impulsively, driven by fear rather than intent to kill, and sought a conviction on lesser charges of manslaughter. However, Lockhart's confession and the brutality of the crime undermined this defense. His lack of remorse during the trial, sitting stone-faced as evidence was presented, further alienated the jury. The Burke family attended every session, their grief palpable. Susan delivered a heart-wrenching victim impact statement, addressing Lockhart directly. "Lauren was our light, our hope. She had so much to give the world, and you took that from her, from us. You didn't just kill her, you stole her future, her dreams, her laughter. How dare you sit there like it means nothing?" Michael, holding Susan's hand, added, "You chose to pull that trigger. You chose to leave my daughter in the dirt. We'll never forgive you." On February 15, 2010, after a 2-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before finding Lockhart guilty of capital murder, kidnapping, and robbery. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution sought the death penalty, citing the heinous nature of the crime. The defense pleaded for life without parole, presenting testimony about Lockhart's troubled upbringing and addiction struggles. On March 1, 2010, Judge Walker sentenced Lockhart to death, stating, "Your actions were deliberate and cruel, showing a complete disregard for human life." This court finds no mitigating factors to justify leniency. The Burke family, though relieved by the verdict, found little solace in Lockhart's punishment. Susan later said, "No sentence can bring Lauren back. We live with her absence every day, but we fight to keep her memory alive." They established the Lauren Burke Memorial Scholarship at Auburn University, supporting students pursuing political science or creative writing. The scholarship has helped dozens of students, a testament to Lauren's passion for education and advocacy. Auburn University honored Lauren with a memorial bench on campus, inscribed with her favorite quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Her sorority created an annual community service event in her name, benefiting the animal shelter she loved. The College Park complex installed security cameras and improved lighting, measures prompted by Lauren's death to enhance student safety. Courtney Lockhart, now 41, remains on death row at Holman Correctional Facility in Alabama. His appeals, citing ineffective counsel and mental health issues, have been denied, though the legal process continues, delaying his execution. In prison, he has reportedly expressed regret, but the Burke family dismisses his words as insincere. "He had a choice," Michael said. "He chose to take our daughter's life." His apologies mean nothing. The tragedy of Lauren Burke resonates as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impact of senseless violence. Her vibrant spirit lives on in the hearts of her family, friends, and the Auburn community, who honor her by embracing the kindness and courage she embodied. Like the biblical story of David and Goliath, where a seemingly small figure faces a formidable foe, Lauren's legacy stands tall against the darkness of her killer's actions, inspiring others to live with purpose and love.